Hey everyone, it's Adam with Arcade Heroes. Welcome to another live stream, the first of 2023 for me. And the arcade year in review for 2022. Now, I know you're supposed to do this on the last week of the year, particularly New Year's Eve if you can. But I've been suffering, or throughout December, I was suffering from a pretty nasty cough, and it was hard to talk for a long time. And so just couldn't really belt it out. And also, I was super busy at the arcade. Anytime school is out, it's busy here. And so there were those issues. And in the past few days, I was trying to do a live stream throughout this past week, but every time I would try to get started, somebody would come in, want to chat me up quite a bit. And so yeah, let me just set a thing aside here. Alright, and let's get to there. Hello, Blake. Hello. There's the cough. So hopefully this doesn't get too bad. But, hello, chat. And, yeah, anything you guys want to talk about that happened in arcades throughout 2022, then that's what this live stream's for. If there are any issues with my audio, please let me know, as I'm not being set up here to listen to myself and make sure that it's sounding okay. But on December 31st, I did post this on arcadeheroes.com, still on the front page, because there hasn't been a ton of news since, just the new version of 007 that they're only making 500 of. As I mentioned in that post, I wanted to thank those who advertise on Arcade Heroes, because it does cost money to run the site more than ever, and so they always help with that. So we have Touch Magics, which has the big banner up top, and Primetime Amusements, a distributor, and then Raw Thrills, a manufacturer here. And they actually recently sent me this new ad, which interestingly enough came from Betson. But gosh, yeah, this cough is starting to flare up, and this is the reason why I didn't do the I haven't done a live stream in a while, is just because I would start talking and I would start coughing, and so that's always fun and very professional. But how did last year go? If there are any arcade operators watching, feel free to say something in the chat and let me know. There is a Facebook group for arcade operators, and I asked there. Seems almost everybody that I saw a response from said that 2022 was really good for them. Some were saying it was the best year they'd ever seen. That particularly Redemption stuff was doing great, making a killing, which for me as a video gamer who kind of detests Redemption, I find that sad, but I do get it. That's why a lot of people come to arcades anymore, sadly, is to toss their credits away at getting tickets and hopefully getting something. But yes, Blake, you graduated, so congratulations on that. He majored in computer science, and so I believe he's also been looking for a job within the arcade industry, and so that would be pretty cool. Let me just get situated here. I also have a beverage to liquefy my throat. Maybe that'll help. But for me, 2022 was okay, but not great. As some of you know, I ended up closing my second location, my second arcade. That was in a place called Ogden, Utah. And it's because it didn't do great. In fact, the earnings were pretty bad through most of the year, from the beginning of the summertime until through December. Just looking at how well things earned year to year, comparing 2021 to 2022, I did not see this massive increase in business like some others have seen, and so I've had to close it down. And so that was unfortunate, but sometimes that's just what happens. And there are various factors. I'll probably do a complete video post-mortem of sorts as to what that is about, or why I think that failed, and I'll keep that separate. But for me, yeah, it just wasn't the greatest. Now, I am sitting in my original arcade location right now, and so I actually may have to help customers here, as is typical with a lot of these live streams. And so if somebody interrupts us, it'll happen. It might happen right now, as I have some people kind of hovering around. In fact, maybe I'll go turn on some games. So hang tight really quick, and I'll be right back. Okay. And I also forgot to share this link on Discord, so let me do that really quick. Okay, there we go. Anyways. Alright, so, yeah, like I said, for me, it wasn't the greatest year, and now, for both locations, they did see some decrease in business, and I think that both locations are in malls, and both malls have movie theaters. Now, in the location where I'm at right now, it has a movie theater, but that movie theater has no arcade. But there is a giant FEC down the hall, literally walking distance. If you walk outside my entrance here, you can see it at the other end of the mall. And so I've had to compete with that. But up in Ogden, there wasn't an FEC, but the movie theater there did have a pretty decent arcade there. It wasn't as large, it didn't have as many games as I had up there, but it was still something that I had to compete with. And throughout 2022, just you might have seen the stories that talk about how fewer people are going to the movies than ever, outside of 2020. And just for the most part, people are just waiting for big releases to come out at home, and then just some movies also just sucked and bombed. And so, like, throughout the years, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, the better that a movie release is doing, then the better I do. And so businesses like mine do benefit from having good movie releases, and I've literally seen that multiple times. I remember the first day that the arcade ever broke $1,000 in earnings. It was when the Lego movie came out, and of course that was down at this mall, and that was before the FEC existed. Now guys, we don't use quarters, you need tokens, so if it's not working, I can trade you. We use tokens. I can trade you. But we use tokens. They're tokens. Okay. They don't want to come and talk to me. You come here. I can help you. Okay. I need to get a card system. So, yeah, I know. And that might be one reason why Ogden didn't do as great, is, everybody's used to card systems now. In fact, I've heard a lot recently of people coming in and saying, hey, I love that you still use tokens. But it's proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that card systems make more money than token systems do. And then you also avoid some of these problems of coin jams in particular, or other coins that don't belong to your arcade coming into your system, and thus really you're not making anything off of that. But yeah, that was bizarre. I mean, they came in and tried putting quarters in, and you saw I tried to help them out, but they just stared at me and then they walked off. And so I don't get that. Anyways, yes, casual people in a nutshell. And so it's like, that's the kind of games that you need to appeal to. for out there. But anyways, with 20 going into 2023, I mean, there are issues. Like I said, the movie business, the worse it does, it hurts locations like mine. So I need Hollywood to put out more Maverick Top Guns and less Strange Worlds or whatever that one was called that bombed. Just need movies that people want to come out and watch. But of course, who knows if even if they put out movies like that, if people will really want to go see the theaters again, because it's super expensive. But that's another factor that plays into how I see things going into 2023. Inflation still sucks. Gas prices still suck. Food prices still suck. And electrical costs as well. Like that's one reason why I will do this odd thing, which does confuse people. I admit that, and so I'm trying to figure out ways to do it better. But when I open up in the mornings, since I have to be open pretty early in high Ted for the because I have to open when the mall says I need to open, and 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. doesn't really make sense for an arcade. Usually there's just not a lot of people around at all. I mean, just out there you can kind of see, I mean, yeah, there's a few people walking here and there, but it's not busy. I mean, it's a mall, and so people are at work, people are at school, people are doing something else other than shopping at a mall or coming to see a movie. The movie theater isn't even open yet. And so to me, it's like, why should I waste having an arcade full of 60-ish games on just for that instance that somebody might come in. So I do have signage which says, some of the games are off to save power, and usually I'll have ones up front so that people realize that we're open. But I know in some places, particularly the UK, electrical costs have been a nightmare and just have cost so much money. But I've saved thousands of dollars over the years by doing this. And now, granted, am I losing some business from it? Sometimes, probably, yes. And so that's where I'm trying to figure out what's the proper balance to help bring people in while still saving on power and not wasting it. And so if I could choose my own hours, I would be opening at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon because, again, arcades are not a day thing, really. So on the TMNT, the reason why it doesn't have a marquee at the second is I just brought that down from the closed location in Ogden, and we misplaced the bolts. And so I need to drive up there, but it's like a 45 minute drive, so it's not a quick jaunt. And so I will get it on this week. In fact, I haven't brought all of my equipment down from that location yet, and that was another reason why I didn't do this live stream sooner, is that last week I spent 2 entire days, morning to night, moving equipment out of there that I could onto a smaller U-Haul truck. But the plan is to get a giant truck that can fit the rest of our equipment. We have 15 more games to bring into this space. I'm still kind of unsure how I'm going to fit it all, but I'll find a way. And but yeah, and so there's still some things that are incomplete, and so that's the reason why. But it'll get done, and hopefully by next week I'll have everything in here, and then I'll do a new tour, and that should be interesting to just see how you fit all this equipment into a 3,000 square foot space. And just as you mentioned, Roy, the electrical costs are a nightmare, and this is the best solution that I've found to helping with that, is just not turning everything on when nobody's around. And so for Blake, I still have DDR. I've had quite a few people show interest in it lately, much more than usual, even though I haven't put a for sale sign on it, or I haven't put a for sale listing out there yet. But given that I have a Step Maniacs right over here, it does seem like it might be good just because I need the space. But at the same time, over this weekend, who is calling me? Nope, this is a call I need to take. So, sorry, live stream here. Hello? It's okay. Oh, sorry about that. So, yeah, I mean, running a business, you gotta do stuff. You can't just sit around and play. Like a lot of people, they assume that if you operate an arcade, you just sit around and play games all day. I mean, maybe if you're not the owner, that's true, but definitely not for somebody who is the owner. Yeah. And so, I mean, yeah, I'm still kind of unsure how I'm going to set everything up here because if you've seen any videos of my Ogden location, you know, I have a House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn, I have a Luigi's Mansion arcade, and they're both about the same size as this Walking Dead that's sitting right here. And I also have a Jurassic Park over there. And so they're huge machines, and just how the space is situated here, it's not very conducive to being able to cram a bunch of these size machines up front. And so I already have a lot in the back there too. But I mean, we can push things back to a degree. It's kind of one of those things. While I can make measurements and sort of figure it out, it's one of those things where it's just like when the equipment's here, it kind of changes it. So it's like I don't really like doing paper layouts just because I've found that oftentimes when the equipment's there, then it's like, well, actually that doesn't look good where it's at. It fits, but it doesn't necessarily look good in that spot. And so, or there's issues with, you know, you need to have walkways with enough space there. And so I do wish this store that I was in was a couple feet or maybe a meter wider than it is, and that would help things out, but it is what it is. Now, let's see, on Arcade Heroes throughout there. Oh, I guess I should mention one other thing that I did mention in the post here is that with inflation, it's been affecting every commodity out there, but also it's affected arcade machine game prices. And pre-pandemic, the average cost of an arcade machine was maybe $7,500, $8,000. Somewhere around there on average, but now your average is probably $10,000 to $12,000, and there's just been so many more games that have been released which are well over $20,000, like the new Fast and Furious arcade, or even right here, this new Halo Fireteam Raven. I was hearing quotes on that for $24,000, which is quite a bit more than the $12,000 that the two-player deluxe version cost. That game is very cool, but I might have to wait and see. They were talking about doing a two-player version of that too, but they're going to get this one out first. But going back in the year, so very first story ran on arcadeheroes.com in January 4th, 2022 was Sega launches Mission Impossible Arcade DX in North America and Europe. Now, if you want to see a video of the 2022 games, I guess I should have had that up already. Well, let me go into YouTube Studio. Yeah, right here. It's this little video here, and it will show you everything that was released in 2022. And so for the very first game that launched last year, it was Mission Impossible Arcade Deluxe model. They have a Super Deluxe model, which is pretty cool, but just that was over $30,000, and so not every location wants that or has the space for it, and so they launched this one right here. And so I don't know if any of you out there have played this yet, and it's definitely a different feel given how it has the dual mounted handguns. Would have been interesting if they had done like a free pistol version, almost like Time Crisis, although dual wielding. I don't know how casuals might handle that in the West. I mean, in Japan they handle it just fine. Gunslinger Stratos is a good example of that. But you know, 4 guns, but really 2 players on one cabinet might not work out for everybody. And so yeah, just checking the chat here. Thank you so much to the Rexer Show for that super chat, a free token for those who don't know what a token is. Yep. And so, like I said, I'm one of the last holdouts. I've still got my tokens here, but as those people that came by, if you were watching the stream, then didn't know. I think they were using quarters, but when I offered to help them, I don't know if they understood me or not, and they just kind of gave me a strange look and they walked off. Also on January 4th, Stern Pinball unveiled details on their Rush pinball machine. I'll open it in a new tab here. And so if any of you out there played Rush, and if so, what did you think about it? I mean, personally, I'm not really a fan of that band. I do know a few of their songs. I mean, I like hard rock and rock from the 80s and 90s, but a lot of the bands that Stern has focused on haven't always been my thing. Like, I like Metallica, but Rush, I don't know, I just never really got into them. And the design of it seemed cool and everything, but when it came to rock band designs, more recent ones, like if you were to put Rush up against Guns N' Roses from Jersey Jack, while I'm kind of indifferent on both bands, the design of the game, I preferred the Guns N' Roses one. But yeah, not my wasn't my favorite. But I also think that music pins probably do better, like most pins, but do even better in a bar environment. Whereas in my arcade, as I posted a video about this last year, which got a lot of traction, and I know some of you discovered the channel through that video, so thank you for still following me. I know there were some people who disagreed with me on my stance or opinions about pinball, and that's fine. And definitely got some good pushback and good thoughts on the whole situation with pinball. It's just and I do agree that a bar is where pinball really shines, but in an arcade that's not a bar, kind of like mine, unfortunately, it just doesn't really pull its weight. And this issue with inflation is also really hurting it. It's like, even if I liked the 007 design, which I was kind of meh on, I found it a little bit bland, but that could also be due to the software. The game's starting at $7,000, where pro models used to start at $5,400 around there, close to $5,000. It just doesn't make any sense for a business to have a $7,000 game that could take 7 years or longer to pay itself off. And so, yeah, I mean, I was able to play premium a little bit, and that's definitely a better one on Bond than the pro model. But yeah, found pro just kind of boring. But unfortunately, that's kind of the case with a lot of the pros out there too. Sorry, I'm just catching up on chat here. And so, yeah, I mean, there was supposed to be a Mission Impossible arcade designed for Joyopolis, or is it Joyopolis, I think. And I think it was going to be like an 8-player thing, kind of like what they did with Lost World and House of the Dead and all that stuff. But still haven't seen anything about that, so I don't know if it got canceled or if it's just taking a while to get off the ground. But yeah, and that's one thing when it comes to pinball that I find very irritating, is just how long it takes them to put out the right software. Like, obviously there's cost to consider, and it might cost too much and take too long to get something done, and so that's why they kind of put out an unfinished game. But in a way, it feels a little bit unprofessional to constantly be putting out a game that's bland and the software is very incomplete, and then later on kind of use the public as beta testers to get that out. And that sort of thing is only acceptable in pinball, kind of because you don't have a choice. But still, it's like it would be much better if they would finish the software or get it much closer to fix. All they have to do is finish to get it, just iron out the bugs. But like, not having a bunch of voiceovers in the game and not having certain rules implemented in the game, that doesn't make sense to me. That just feels almost lazy to have to do. And so but yeah, I guess it's the modern way that we do things now with software. So but But, I'm surprised to hear of an FEC out there still using tokens. And so the first arcade I worked for was an FEC. It used to be just a block away from me, but they closed down in like 2014 or so. When I first started working there, they were using a card system, but because of a security breach with employees, where there were some employees that figured out how to make cards that had something like 32,000 points on them, and they were selling them on the street, and for much cheaper than it cost 32,000 credits for, and that made it so they switched over to tokens for quite a while. But I think maybe near the end they might have gone back to a card system. Okay. But that is something I am considering. I mean, there's a ton of options out there for card systems now. There are some that are a little bit cheaper too, which is nice. It's just, hey, take it easy on the controls, please. But yeah, and so there was Stern's Rush that came out. Also, pre-orders for a Kai Katana or Crimson Katana Extra label opened up in January. The game was released in February. And, that's cool. Yeah, the golf and stuff. I'm pretty sure they went back to that same golf and stuff in Cobra Kai. I did catch up on that when I was sick after when I started getting this cough. But yeah, everybody has a different recommendation, it seems, for card systems. I've heard plenty of people say they like Sakoa, they like Embed, they like Intercard, they like Amusement Connect, and there's a couple of other ones that I saw at IAPA, and so it's just kind of all over the place. But yeah, Maximum Tune 5DX Plus launched in North America. I did a video about this as well, where I was talking about why didn't 6RR come to North America. A lot of people were kind of confused about that, and I did talk with Bandai Namco, and the short answer is that they had found that player feedback was a bit more negative on 6R, and 6RR compared to 5DX Plus, but also there was some issues with licensing and things of that nature, because they have to do all these complex licensing deals with the different car companies, and I guess a lot of it had already been paid for, but the only reason 5DX Plus didn't come sooner was because of the pandemic. Like, it was supposed to launch in 2020, which was still late compared to when Japan got it, but still, it's just those different factors are the reason why they did 5DX Plus and kind of just left 6 unused in the West. And so, but as I said on Twitter, I have heard through the grapevine of my network, if you want to call it that Maximum Tune 7 is coming, and there is a very strong possibility it could be at JPO. Now, I talked with somebody at Bandai Namco where they weren't sure about that, and so, but they also might just not want to say it. I'm not sure though, but at least the guy I talk to, he's always been pretty upfront with me and honest, and so so I'm not sure. I won't make a promise that it could be at JPO, but there is a very good chance. And so now Maximum Tune 7, I remember pre-pandemic Bandai Namco Amusements America was saying that they were going to do a global launch, so that would mean Europe would get it as well, but don't know if that's still going to be the case post-pandemic, because you know how many things have changed. I know one reason why Europe has often been ignored on Maximum Tune 7 is the licensing deals. From my understanding, they can't get a licensing deal for the US and Europe in the same package. Like, it has to be negotiated separately or paid for separately or something like that. And so it costs a lot of money, and when it comes to Initial D, when it comes to Maximum Tune, the companies that manufacture these, Bandai Namco or Sega respectively, they have to be sure that they're going to make enough sales to warrant how much it costs them to develop the software, to get all the licensing in place. And Bandai Namco's told me some numbers before of how much it costs them on licensing, and unfortunately I'm not at liberty to share those publicly, but I was floored by how much it costs. It's very, very expensive to do some of these licensing deals, and that's one reason why Cruise and Blast changed, where the license expired, like with Ferrari, and they ended up removing Ferrari and some other cars from Cruise and Blast in 2020, and they put in some classic Chevy cars, and so those were just a lot cheaper to license. And so you just, these companies have to make determinations so that they're not losing money, because a lot of times, especially with arcade companies where they don't have console ports and stuff to kind of back up additional cash. Or Eugene Jarvis recently mentioned in an interview saying that if we were just out for money, we would be Ponzi crypto bros hawking NFTs on people, which was kind of a shot at Atari, I think, because Atari's doing that really hard. But yeah, when it comes to any of these releases, I mean, all these games like you're seeing cycle through here on the Raw Thrills ad, these cost millions of dollars to develop and license, and it can be more so with racing games. And so this is one of those unfortunate things that kind of pops up with development and whatnot these days. And I also learned at IAPA that the reason why you don't see damage modeling on cars anymore in arcade games anymore is because of the licenses. Is that all these companies, Ford, Toyota, Nissan, etc., they don't want to see their cars crunched up. And it's like, yeah, you can find pictures of expensive cars crunched up all over the internet, but they just don't want to see that in a game. And so it's like, really the only way you'll see damage modeling again most likely is just if you have a game like, say, San Francisco Rush 2049, where they just invented their own cars and then they could damage model them all that they wanted to. Oh, thank you, Bush and Rio Cat, for the $5. Very much appreciated. And yeah, Porsche licensing would also be very expensive. Like, there's one reason why Asphalt 9 Legends Arcade wouldn't have a ton of licenses is because just all those supercars are not going to be cheap to license. And so, yeah, that's one. And unfortunately just also limits how much comes to Europe as well. So, oh, interesting. I didn't know that Dead Heat Unleashed was testing in New York City. That's interesting. And so, yeah, what do I think Initial D the arcade will come in 2023? I haven't heard. A while back, somebody high up in Sega did reach out to me and wanted to know. They wanted to understand the enthusiasm behind Initial D here in the West, and I explained it as best I could. But he was from Sega Japan, and I from the conversations I've had with Sega and about their game developments, like I've heard them, they've told me about certain games that they've wanted to do that to me as a gamer sounded awesome. Like if it's like, man, I would love that. But their sales staff, it's kind of like what I talked about just a few minutes ago, was that when their sales staff have to make sure that these games will sell well enough to warrant the cost of development. And so it's like, yeah, in Japan they know for sure Initial D will sell. It'll sell not just in Japan, it'll sell, I believe, in Malaysia, Australia, places like that. But at least from past performance of Initial D4, it's just not been. They don't see the numbers there, and it's like Maximum Tune 5. One thing that I know holds Maximum Tune back on getting the big sales are the online fees. Is $75 a seat every month. And I was talking with an operator who was very interested in Maximum Tune. He was asking me all these questions about how well it did, but didn't matter that it was often my number one game. He was just looking at that online fee and he couldn't do it, and so he just ended up, I think, getting a Mario Kart, because there's no fee associated with that. I'm not sure if Sega would be charging a fee on Initial D, but still, it's like the market for Maximum Tune 5 or 7 or whatever it might be is already limited. It's like you guys have probably seen out there's a lot of arcades that don't have it. I don't believe most Dave and Buster's have one. I think most Round 1 USA's do have one, but Round 1 USA is only one chain, and there are thousands of FECs out there. And if you only have 1 or 2 chains willing to buy a bunch of a game, but they're more willing to, well, let's say there's only a few willing to buy Maximum Tune, but almost everybody's willing to buy, say, Mario Kart, then for the company that's manufacturing these, it's an easy choice as to which one they're going to manufacture. And I was even told at IAPA that Mario Kart, they had just started a production of, I can't remember the exact number, I want to say it was like 600 units or even more. And so it's just, unfortunately, one of those realities. Now, it is possible that a new Initial D will be announced for Japan here at JPO as well, and that would be interesting. You have Maximum Tune 7 and a new Initial D there. But yeah, as far as the West, I haven't seen any indicators from Sega showing that they're interested in that. And they just, at IAPA, as I covered as well, they recently just unveiled some new racing games, and Sega in particular has to be very careful about stomping on their own feet, I'll say, for YouTube purposes, other than the other phrase that might get me banned with the guidelines. And that is, actually Sega did this, I think it was about in 2008, 2009. I remember going to Amusement Expo, and they had 3 or 4 brand new racers. And the problem is if you release too many racers or light gun games at the same time, then you're going to limit how many sales you're going to get one of each. And so, like, now they have Drone Racing Genesis, they have ATV Slam, they have Storm Riders 2, and then I think they're still selling some Daytonas out there. If they release an Initial D right now, it also might be tough. And there also was talk a few years ago, I know they wanted to do an Outrun 3, but there are internal issues at Sega that they have to deal with, like they need Yu Suzuki's permission, and I think he has to have some input on the project because that's how they work in Japan, is allowing the original creators stay on any new versions of it as well. But Sega probably could do a console version of Initial D. Last I heard, the arcade development division of Sega Japan has been greatly diminished. It's practically just Initial D and some people to do some stuff for their all.net plus multi 3 network, or APM3. So I don't know. It is possible they could just say, yeah, let's just do the we'll just do a console port or something. But there's still pushback from us operators on console ports, and so I guess it's our fault that you don't get a lot of them. I'm not sure how well Cruisin' Blast is done on Nintendo Switch as far as the sales go. But when I've talked with Sega about ports, they usually bring up how Outrun 2 performed on the original Xbox, and they said it bombed, that it wasn't worth it for them. So they could look at Initial D and be like, it won't be worth the trouble. But again, I'm not privy to all the numbers that they see, so I'm kind of limited into how much guessing I can do or how much commentary I can do as to the reasons why or why not they might do those things. Would I like to see Initial D come out here? Sure. I'd love to see Maximum Tune 7. I need to look at my numbers, and I'll do a video about my numbers here soon from 2022. Maximum Tune 5, I think, might not have been my number 1 game, but that's because it was down for over a month. Both of the computers on it crapped out, and so that was an issue in holding it back. I did have a Cruisin' Blast that crapped out too, just the monitor, and I do have a video of replacing the LCD portion of that screen, that was a lot of fun to have to do. But yeah, Mario Kart, the thing that I imagine would make more sense for Namco is to do another Mario Kart, Mario Kart Arcade 4, and just improve what they already have with DX, and that as long as it doesn't have an online thing, it will sell like hotcakes, as the old saying goes. Also, back in January, Prop Cycle style game Skyriders came out. That actually was released in Europe back in 2021, but it is available in the United States. Although, oddly enough, I did not see this at Amusement Expo nor IAPA. I was hoping to see it there. But Amusement Source International, the distributors in the U.S. for it, decided not to. Not 100% sure why. I guess I should just ask them. This was some very sad news that happened at the end of January. Lyman Sheets, who was very, very well known in pinball circles, took his own life. And yeah, just a sad story. I mean, anybody who's knows somebody who's taken their own life can attest to that. I had a very good friend back in 2018 do that, and that, yeah, it sucks. And so, and unfortunately, there was news just the other day, last week, I think, that the Busters of Dave & Buster's, one of the original two partners of Dave & Buster's, also took his own life. He had some health issues or something, and I guess decided to do that. And so, yeah, that was very unfortunate. 18-wheeler, yeah, that was a cool one. I admit I haven't played it much. I haven't come across it much out there. In fact, I can't remember the last time that I came across an 18-wheeler. But, yeah, it was a cool game. I wouldn't mind to see more games like that. The last time I saw anything close to it was Power Truck S by AGS. That was like 2013, I think. I loved the sound system in that, though. That was awesome. And so, yeah, and he wasn't just a coder at Stern, Lyman Sheets. Sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth on things here. But there is a tribute post to him there. There were a lot of people in the pinball community that wrote tributes. Plenty of people met him. I unfortunately do not recall ever meeting him. But he was an amazing pinball player as well. And so won many tournaments. And so, yeah, just rest in peace to Lyman Sheets. And Barry Orsler, I can't remember if he was last year or 2021, but also rest in peace to him. On Dave & Buster's, it was originally founded by two guys. One was Dave, I forget his last name, and then the other guy, I forget his name, unfortunately, I'm sorry. But his nickname was Buster, and so that's where Dave & Buster's came from. Yeah, no problem. Use as many buckets as you need. Sure. And if you need me to count any coins, I can do that too. You're fine. On a live stream talking about arcades, so Alan Chiak as well, so rest in peace to Alan Chiak. And just, yeah, it really sucks that, you know, that there's been some of these instances where they've done that. Get the old tokens being counted here. But sorry, on Dave & Buster's, yeah. So the other owner, partner, had his nickname was Buster, and so that's where Buster's came from in the Dave & Buster's. But I believe he had a stroke or a series of strokes, something like that, that left him. It was very difficult to be doing things, and he decided to take his life. So 454. Thanks. Yeah. So I hate it when I read about that. If there's anybody that's that you know in those situations, feeling very down, be a friend is probably the best advice that I can give. But yeah. Now moving on to happier news. Throughout the year, I've covered new locations opening their doors, and so I call these location watches. This is where I will do as many. I will cover new arcade openings, grand openings out there, and anywhere on the planet, even if it's in Antarctica. I don't care. I'll do it, and I'll talk about it and highlight it. And I've even highlighted the FEC down the hall from me, so even though they're a competitor. But just spreading the good word of arcades out there is opening up that I do on Location Watch. And so we had one in January, March, May, July, September, October, and December. As I recall, the March one got the most attention. In January, there was Elevate Fun Center in Florida, Revenge of in Los Angeles, Game Bird Arcade Bar in Vermont, Dakota Center in Iowa, Kung Fu Saloon number 7 in San Antonio, Catch Panda in Saskatoon, and over in Europe, New Wave Gaming Arcade, Carousel in Huddersfield, UK, Gravity number 14 in Germany. As I recall, a lot of these location watches, there were quite a few opening up in Germany last year. Also quite a bit of growth in India, like the Game Garden, Futura, Arcade Garage in Australia, and some stuff in Japan. That was January, of course. In March, we had, started with Japan. Of course, there was lots of news about Geigo and getting to the gaming oasis where Genda had purchased all of Sega's arcade operations in Japan, and they did close some very popular locations, but they reopened some. Unfortunately, I know with Geigo, or Gigo, I'm not trying to remember my Japanese here, I think it's Gigo. One very unfortunate thing is they've removed a lot of video games out of them, and they've focused a lot more on prize machines, UFO catchers, and that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate, but kind of like I mentioned at the very beginning of the stream, a lot of money is made with redemption and prizes, and it's very, very hard for most companies to stick to a principle like mine and lose money when you could be making a lot more with redemption. Sorry, I need to take another drink here. For Mark, I've been interested in getting some of the NG dev team games like Krautbuster or Gunlord, and you mentioned Xenocrisis, and I'm trying to remember some of their other cool games that they came out with, but I haven't done any yet. I guess I've just been focused on other things. I mean, granted, I have sort of done that in a way, that with the XR Arcadia, because there's quite a few games on there that have the old look, or they're remakes of older games, like Gimmick Exact Mix being based on a 1992 game on the NES, or Samurai Showdown 5 Perfect 2003 game, so now 20 years old at this point, and some others that would be essentially like running retro games on a new platform, or soon going to have Donut Dodo Do on it, and they've done okay. They haven't done amazing though, and so it's hard to say how worth it some of those might be, but I'm gonna keep at it and keep seeing what works, what doesn't. And so one issue that I've noticed with a lot of indie games, because I have owned several indie games. One recent one that I had was Cosmotrons by Arcadeaholics LLC, and that one looked just like Gravatar by Atari from 1982, but it was on a newer cabinet, and it had a 4K monitor, widescreen, all that, but the look of the game was, just like a vector game from 1982. Granted, it didn't have that vector flicker and glow exactly, but one issue that I've noticed, at least in my arcade, It might not be like this in FECs or bar arcades, but at least here where I'll get casual people that don't even know how tokens work. When they see an old game, a game that looks old, even if it's brand new, oftentimes they'll just think it's an old game that I shoved into a new cabinet and walk on by. You know, it's like, oh, that's something I've never heard of, so whatever. Or it looks too weird, and so whatever. And so while indie games using an old look can do great on like Steam or eShop or PSN or Xbox Live Arcade, in an arcade environment where you can have a game that's 40, 50 years old sitting there, and then you have a brand new game that's from 2023, but it looks like a game from 1982, people just don't know. They don't realize a lot of the time. And this was an issue I had with Sky Cursor as well. I loved that game. It was really fun. Kind of had a Metal Slug look to it. It looked like it came out in 1996 or 95. But just people didn't play it. It made like $2 to $7 a week. And so my advice to any indie developer out there would be, if you can, add any other special effects to your graphics that can make it look a little bit better, because a lot of the time in these environments, graphics do matter. They stop people in their tracks when it looks new, but when it looks old, they're just kind of like, well, it's not Pac-Man, or Galaga, so whatever. And so but again, that might not apply to every location. Like in a retro arcade, maybe it would do better, but at least in an arcade like mine, where I have brand new stuff and I have retro stuff all in the same place, it seems to just get lost a lot of the time, because pretty much almost every single indie game that I've had, excepting like Friction, which was a light gun game, but that one was not trying to look like a retro game. For the time, it looked great for a game that was made by 2, 3, 4 guys. And sometimes that game would out-earn my House of the Dead 4. And so, like, if it's like a game or a racing game, maybe it would have a better chance. But like a joystick game or a button-only game, and it's looking like an 80s game, they just don't do well. And so I hate to say it, because I love those sorts of games. Soon I'm going to do a review of the Atari 50th Anniversary Collection, because it does have a bunch of arcade games on there. Just in it from a business perspective, they're not doing great. And so I would say, if you can add in some special effects, there in the 90s there were some really cool 2D effects, like on the SNES and the Genesis and the Saturn and stuff. They would do cool manipulations of the 2D sprites and the images and stuff, scaling effects and all that stuff. Throw an extra flash if you're an indie game developer, and it won't hurt, is what I could say. And of course the cabinet also cabinets also help too. Sorry, just catching up on the chat here. It looks like I'm a little bit behind, and let's see. I've actually thought about that on Bush and Ryocat. I've thought about a truck sort of thing, or like there's a guy here in Salt Lake City who he bought a bus from an auction. It wasn't a full-sized bus. It was like a half-size one, but he bought it for like $5,000, painted it all black, removed most of the seats, but got it running. He was able to fill it up with some arcade machines, and he was able to drive it to conventions. And I thought, that's a great idea, because when I would go to the same convention, I had to load up all these games onto a box truck, and it was a pain in the butt. It took all day, and oftentimes could damage things or lose bolts. And it was just such a pain to do. And it's like, oh man, I would much rather just have everything on a truck or a trailer, just wheel it into some place and set it down, plug it in, and have it make money. So yeah, that would be great. It's just, it probably costs, I don't know how many thousands of dollars exactly. But yeah, I've seen stuff like that before, like these carnival trailers where you just open up the sides and they have all these games in them are already set up, and so the operator really doesn't have to do anything. Atari made one way back in the day, and I know Elot's done things like that with crane machines and stuff, so I wouldn't mind something like that. And I've seen some different mobile arcades at places like IAPA, although most of them that show up at IAPA are usually just like a trailer that has an Xbox installed inside with a sofa, and it's like, that's not an arcade, sorry. But, you know, sometimes there are things like that out there that I've been interested in. And so, yeah, one of these days, yeah, like carnival trailer arcades. But anyways, and again, apologies. I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream, but if you weren't here, one reason why I started this later and didn't do this 2 weeks ago was I've had a cough that's just been plaguing me almost since I lost my voice at IAPA. And so it's been difficult to talk for a long time. And so I was feeling like today I could do it, but I still have this cough. In North America, you have Deezerland Park in Orlando, which looks like a really cool... And actually, I had visited this mall. It was a defunct mall, and I had visited it with somebody at an IAP, I think 2018, 2019, where they were the ones considering opening up a place. It wasn't the people who did this Deezerland, but I got to walk through there, and it was like, wow, this could be quite an amazing amusement facility, basically like a theme park. But of course, Orlando is known for that. Route 7 Adrenaline Warehouse in Rockledge, Florida opened up. Game On Bar and Arcade in Annapolis, Maryland. Draftcade number 3 in Richmond, Virginia. Galactics in Astoria, Oregon. Downtown Flavatown in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. That was Guy Fieri, I think his name is. Subpar expansion in San Francisco, California. And I think I also mentioned this in the most recent one, because they did there's a second location that opened with more equipment. X-Lanes number 3 in Fresno, California. Strikers in Jefferson City, Missouri. And then over in the Europe and UK, NQ64 number 7. That's been a bar arcade chain that's been growing a lot. Over in the UK, they opened one in Glasgow. Arcade Warehouse number 3 in North Shields, UK. The Beach Bar Aberdeen in Aberdeen, Scotland. I don't report on too many arcades opening up in Scotland for some reason. Wonderland Adult Soft Play in London. And then over in Oceania, Asia, back to the arcade in Goulburn, Australia. And time zones, lots of time zones opened up last year as well. Let's see, and then in May... Oh, wow. I kind of figured that with NQ64, just given how much they were growing. But I've also noticed throughout these location watches just how many bar arcades, and particularly NQ64s, seem to be opening up. So I figured somebody's got to have some cash behind them. All right, from May, over in the USA, we had Shorty's Pins and Pints, or Pins Cross Pints, opening up in Pittsburgh. Retro City Arcade in Pembroke, North Carolina. Don't know where I got new from. Sprocket's Fun Foundry in Keystone, South Dakota. I actually visited this place when I went on summer vacation. We went to South Dakota, visited Mount Rushmore and some other locations in the Black Hills. But Keystone's, it's like the closest little town to Mount Rushmore, if you ever been there or ever go there. And so I was like, hey, I reported about this recently, so let's go check it out. And so, yeah, I was able to take some pictures. And so they were the first place that I had seen this SpongeBob Dynamic Duo VR game where one player is driving, the other player shooting. And I guess I needed a better camera for that, as it's a little bit blurry. But, you know, they had a decent arcade space with all new stuff. Slam & Jam Ultra, Halo Fireteam Raven. They had a little bar area over there. Had a very cool giant robot that kids could climb up into and take pictures on the outside. Somebody, I guess, made the video private of Sprockets. Oh, well. Panama Barcade in Boquete, Panama. And so I've seen this, the owner for this one posting a lot of photos here of this place. Lots of retro games. Big Best in Games in Ypsilanti, Michigan. The Beer Research Institute Tap Room and Arcade in Mesa, Arizona. One of these days I need to get down to Arizona. It's next door to Utah, but I've only been there once, and I lay over Kudos Tap Room and Field House in Taylor, Michigan. Double Tap in Iowa City, Iowa. Pete's Pirate Pete's Family Adventures in Peverly, I think, Missouri. Sports and Social number 12 in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Hi. How can I help you? Okay. Do you want ones or do you want tokens? Okay. There's 5. There's 10. And if there's anything that's off that you want to play, let me know. I can turn it on for you. Let's see, where were we? Oh yeah, there was a second Dave & Buster's in Brooklyn that opened their doors. And a main event opened in Waco. And of course, that was big news last year as well, was that Dave & Buster's and Main Event essentially merged, or Dave & Buster's bought Main Event, but they're not getting rid of the Main Event brand. In fact, some Dave & Buster's would be converted over to Main Events. And so not sure what criteria they use for that exactly, as I haven't talked with anybody from Dave & Buster's corporate in a while. But yeah, so that's and they're also expanding in the Middle East, and like in Saudi Arabia, and I think it was Egypt, and India and Dubai. So yeah, that's definitely becoming a global chain again. Like, I know in the past they had a location over in the UK, but I guess it failed, and then but they're getting back at it. Let's see, over in Europe and the UK for May 2022, there was Korekuta no Hakoniwa in Bethune, France. And they were more of a street location, as that it's like a Japanese grocery store, but they started adding Japanese arcade machines in there. And so that's a cool little way to do that. Oh, got another phone call. Hello? Yeah. I swear that they were. Don't know how, because yeah, it's like, yeah, they were. What do you mean? Okay. Okay, I'll see what I can find. Part of the fun of owning a business, tax stuff. And it's tax season, so got to deal with that. And so, sorry to have to do this on a live stream, but kind of don't have, I got to get it done. So, and then I'm also getting some customers here finally, but I guess this gets back to the reason why I don't turn on the entire arcade. It's like it took 2 hours before I had somebody here wanting to play games. But yeah, continuing on, I'll try and do both at the same time. We had Gametown Les Landes de Gascon in France. I speak Portuguese, but I don't speak French. I never studied that, so I'm not sure how they pronounce things. NQ64 number 8 in London. Shot opened up in India. Interesting floor that I noticed. Very, very shiny. Probably one of the shiniest floors I've ever seen in an arcade. Time Zone at the Oberoi Mall in Mumbai. And then also some locations opening up in Japan there. Let's see, that was May. We got July. Let me head over here. Back to the arcade in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Castlecade Westtown in Madison, Wisconsin. Expressway Food and Fun in Sophia, West Virginia. And actually, last year, that was one thing that I also noticed was that there were quite a few places opening up in West Virginia, which I normally had not discussed or haven't seen pop up in new arcades opening up. So that was very interesting as well. Synergy Entertainment in Wheeling, Illinois. And what's very interesting about this place is I don't know if it was this particular location. I think this picture came from one of their other locations. But here is the never released prototype for Mario Party Challenge World that Rothrills and Capcom were working on that they first showed at IAPA 2017. And so it's like, interesting that you have that. But Bolorama in Panama City, Florida, and it was just a kind of mainly it was a bowling alley, but they did have a little arcade, so got to mention it. Underdog's Cantina in San Francisco, California, also not a very large arcade from what I could tell, but something there. Dave & Buster's, this was the news about the main event thing from May, and Happy New Year to you, Kevin. And so try and catch up on the chat here as I can, and welcome to anybody who's joined the chat. That machine's busted, but there's this one. Now, are you playing the prize machines?
No, the dance.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I can give you tokens or whatever works for you. Okay. There's $5. Yeah. Oh, hold up. Got more for you. There's 10. There's 15. And if there's anything that's off that you want to play, let me know. I can turn it on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Pathé Games in Lucent and Marseille, France. Opened up. Babylon Park, Camden in London, UK, which is like an indoor theme park. This is a... these guys are based out of Israel, and I don't, but I do have Baggy. Sorry, should have given that.
Thank you.
Yep. The game box opened in Arnhem, the Netherlands. Arnhem, or Arnhem. Roy, you could probably correct me on that. Let's see. In Time Zone, opening a lot more locations. I'm trying to remember the exact number that Time Zone's at now. It's kind of hard to keep track of because they just keep opening locations. And so, which is a good thing. But I know they have over 200 total locations. And so if you're in Oceania, like Australia, Malaysia, I think it is, India as well, Time Zone is, they're bigger than Dave & Buster's. And so, yeah. And then Sparky's Bowling opened in Jisan, Saudi Arabia. That's also a place that I've rarely reported on for new arcades opening up. But, yeah, Saudi Arabia is seeing a lot of growth. The Middle East in general seems like it's having a lot of growth for business. Was that July that I just did? Hopefully I'm not. Oh, yep, it was. Let me go back here. September. Hi. How you doing? Yeah, Time Zone, they look really great. Oh, Roy, you do work for Gamebox there, so cool. Nice to have you on the stream. And yeah, I mean, I've never been to the Eastern Hemisphere, but you know, I read news about Saudi Arabia and such. I saw an interesting story this weekend about them building some strange new city on one of the coasts that's like this giant monolith that'll extend for a kilometer or something. It's kind of crazy. But I mean, I've heard within the industry that there's just been a lot of entertainment growth throughout the Middle East. Like Dubai is pretty obvious with that one, but in other places too, there's just lots of entertainment options being added. And so, let's see, Starport Arcade and Pub opened up in Morgantown, West Virginia, as well, and this is a very cool-looking place. Bite Me Cake Company, Pueblo, Colorado. They are a bakery that makes cakes and cookies, I think it was, or it was cupcakes. Or, I mean, obviously cake. But they added a new Flip-A-Coin arcade bar, which, as you can see, is mostly focused on pinball. And then you could buy a cake afterwards. Scene 75 in Romeoville, Illinois opened up. And Scene 75, this is more of an Eastern United States chain that they're growing. Sure. Did you get the number for the other one? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Gibby's in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. 211 plus these two silvers. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Respawn Arcade opened up in Alexander City, Alabama. In an old building that has a nice character to it. The Grid Arcade Bar opened up in Pensacola, Florida with some cool LED lighting. That's just something I should have done when I was called the Game Grid Arcade. Reboot Social in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Very nice lineup of retro games. Fun Hub Action Park in Hadley, Massachusetts, which I believe is more of a trampoline park. Tilt Studio in Sioux City, Iowa, opening up. And then more Chuck E. Cheese's in round ones. It's like Chuck E. Cheese's did declare bankruptcy after the pandemic, but they've been bouncing back pretty strong here lately. Over in Europe, we had Dead Space opening up in Sheffield in the UK. And I think that was it that we were reporting in September 2022. Although there was news of Sega Amusements purchasing Funbox. Sega Amusements does operate locations or have ownership in locations over in the UK, which they don't have over here. Like over here, they famously were part of GameWorks for a long time. But at least over in the UK, they still have Sega locations like Sega Prize Zone and stuff. And then for this month, you had Musty Zone number 9 opening up in Ghaziabad, India. And this is another chain that I've seen a lot about recently, really expanding over in India. As for the game selection, though, it usually seems more like Chinese and Indian main games. So sometimes there's lots of stuff I don't recognize in their photos. Kicks 10-pin and arcade in Parramatta, NSW, Australia. The Q Prize Zone opening up in the Philippines, although it didn't look like they had any video games. It was just crane machines and merchandisers. And then more time zones in one in Mumbai, another in Victoria, Australia, which, okay, that one was Time Zone's 250th location, and then another in Broadmeadows, Australia. This interesting looking place called Game Space. Don't know where it popped up in China. A lot of these ones that I've been getting in China have come from a manufacturer over there, like a salesperson, but she never says where these are opening up. She'll post photos and they look impressive, but she just doesn't say where they're at. So don't know why that is. So that was September. Hey, how's it going? Nope, I'm just doing a live stream, but you're fine. Sure, no problem.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah.
stops would I be? I was so close yesterday.
Right?
Got distracted, looked away for 1 second, lost it.
Right. Yeah, it's all it takes is, you know, or somebody. Or first, I guess Sundays are busier, so more distractions. Sorry. Actually, I just remembered I needed to be sending this tax thing. Here, so let me do that. The most unprofessional live stream on YouTube, probably. But I guess let me catch up on the chat while I do this. Let's see. I think I've been to a main event once, but I just can't remember. I think I was touring when I was in Texas for Amusement Expo and just visited several places. I remember one was Pin Stack, but I can't remember if another one was main event. But got more customers, got more games going on, so it's a little bit noisier. Let me know if there's any issues in hearing me. But I should be done with this in just a second. And then, of course, I got to do a lot more stuff for taxes here coming up. But, okay. That's done. All right, yeah, Step Maniacs is a great game. The one over there? Yeah. I guess I should be just turning on the entire arcade at this point. But let's see. Let me catch up on the chat really quick, and before I continue on the location stuff here. Oh, sorry to hear you're leaving Gamebox. Going back to the gambling industry. Sweet. Hey, gotta follow the money. Gotta survive. So yeah, I did visit the GameWorks on this back when it was on the Las Vegas Strip, and it was very impressive, very cool. It's the first time I'd seen a Too Spicy arcade setup, but also just first time I'd seen a lot of games like the Outrun 2 Super Deluxe and Zombie Revenge in a dedicated cabinet. So that was really cool. And so yeah, and I'd love to visit a time zone one day. I mean, it'd be great to just tour the world and go visit a bunch of arcades, but I need to find a way to get paid for it. Maybe I'll do a new TV show. Yes, I do have an Addams Family Pinball, so I actually have a guy here who's coming in. He's trying to beat the Grand Champion score, and so he's getting really close. And so, hey, Kevin. And, oh, Leon from Golfland, welcome to the stream. So yeah, just I'm doing this. If you're joining the stream late or you haven't watched one of these before, I'm broadcasting from my arcade, and so and as I mentioned, I tend not to turn everything on until it's needed, and so now is about the time where I tend to get some customers, but that's the reason why. And so what's the GC on it? Sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to. All right, we'll see you, Blake. Thanks for being on the stream for part of it. Got to do your stuff. No problem there. Let's see, for Location Watch October 2022, we had the arcade opening up at Bally's and Horseshoes in Las Vegas, Nevada. We've also got some people playing Cruise and Blast and enjoying it. So no worries about coming late. The stream will be on YouTube afterwards as well. But, oh, Grand Chappie. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, my brain is just kind of scattered. It's usually scattered regardless. But, yeah, this Bally's Horseshoe Arcade looked pretty impressive from the video that I saw of it. It used to be, I think, a sports betting place that looked kind of sad and pathetic, and they turned it into a nice place, proper arcade. And also GameWorks in Vegas, the location there is rebranded itself and reopened as Velocity Esports, but it's still an arcade and stuff. So next time I'm in Vegas, which might be this March for Amusement Expo, I'll hopefully get a chance to go and visit it. Just sometimes in Vegas I'm just not able to go out and visit stuff, but sometimes I am. So I need to still visit the new Pinball Hall of Fame that opened a little while back. Emporium Arcade Bar number 7 opened up in New Orleans. The Gamers Garage Arcade opened up in Marcel, Illinois, which opened up in an actual garage, or what used to be a garage. So pretty cool. Pinball's Kingdom opened up in Buda, Texas. Game House in Long Island City, New York, and Das Flipper House in Rockland, California. It was kind of interesting that you had two different arcades mainly focused on I think it was pinball, that opened up on opposite sides of the country, but they were both kind of using German words for their setup. Arcadomania opened up in Fairmont, West Virginia, and this is one that triggered me doing a video last year about using arcade one-ups in a business. And kind of like I said in that video, the short of it is just nobody goes to like a fancy restaurant and expects to be served fast food. You shouldn't go to an arcade and expect to have arcade one-ups there. They're just not designed for this and for the beating that they often take. And so, and technically they're also not legal to be putting there. So, yeah, and I agree, if a garage works, a garage works. So, and so, let's see. Well, thank you, Kevin. Same to you and your family. And Happy New Year to everybody that's watching. And I think I did meet and talk with Tim once and told him I had an arcade up here. And he's, I could definitely get, I understand his pain with how rough some people can be on games. Let's see. I've seen multiple locations set up arcade one-ups and take money, but I've never owned an arcade one-up, so I don't know how you would set it up, but I'm sure that's still able to do that on software, or you just do the free play arcade, you charge a cover fee, and then, you know, play all the games in there as well. But of course, toy stores and other places that might be selling arcade one-ups, it's fine. It's just, in my opinion, a full arcade like this or a Dave & Buster's should have proper arcade games in them and shouldn't have arcade one-ups. Now, if Arcade One-Up wanted to make full-sized arcade quality cabinets and license some classic games for them, so kind of like how Namco does this with Pac-Man, but maybe some of the Midway games and make them for commercial use, then great. You know, maybe those would be cool. But when they're not made for that, when they're just made for homes and or nonprofit locations or something, it's just they're not going to last, and the quality's not there. And so you need commercial made games for commercial locations, in my opinion. And so, every time I've seen a demo unit set up at Walmart or Costco, the control panel is destroyed. You know, the joysticks are broken, the buttons are broken, and that's the type of abuse that those would get in an arcade too. I mean, maybe it's a little bit more in a Walmart, but both Bandai Namco and Raw Thrills have worked with Arcade 1-Up, and so it's just. I don't think it would be a bad thing if they were able to produce an arcade quality cabinet and license those games for commercial use. It's just that's what should be done if you really want to have those sorts of games in an arcade. But it's like I also made a video about this last year. I did a whole series of operator videos where I was sharing my thoughts on the industry, and I know that brought in a lot of new viewers. And so if you did discover the channel through those, thank you. Really appreciate it. But as I talked about, retro games don't make a lot of money, and so it's kind of hard to say if it would really be worth it if they cost a lot of money. Now, I know some locations can do really well with like Pac-Man's Pixel Bash or Pac-Man's Arcade Party, I think it was called as well. But yeah, and so. Yeah, and it is possible Polycade could do something along those lines too. And I think that's what they're kind of aiming for, because they have a new retro cabinet that looks like an old Nintendo Donkey Kong cabinet, but their Polycade platform on it. And some of the Polycade games are, old Atari games that are licensed for use in a commercial situation. But I also have heard that there have been some concerns on the licensing situation with Polycade. So yeah. And as I mentioned in the retro earnings video, the only things that still make money when it comes to games from the 80s or the early 90s would be Miss Pac-Man and Street Fighter 2, and that's kind of it from what I see. And from looking at earnings at both locations, it's pretty much the same thing. It kind of doesn't matter where I put old retro games, they're just not making a ton of money, and when I mean not making a ton of money, it's like a few bucks a week, and there are some games which may make less than $1 a week, and so in those cases they're really just filler, and sometimes I will sell them off because it's like, this isn't making me any money, I need to replace it with something else that can actually make money. And now sometimes multi-game things can work, but sometimes it's also very confusing for consumers, like the 60-in-1 iCade cabinets that were popular for a time, or Pandora's Box. Obviously there are a lot of illegal issues there, but I don't know of anybody really policing that. But still, when you have 3,000 games on something like a Pandora's Box, most people have no idea what they're gonna find on there. Sorry, 1 second. Well, I'm hoping next week I'll be able to find the right day. So if you want to help, then I would appreciate it.
Just let me know. Give me some notice about when and I should be available.
Yeah. So like part of the reason I'm waiting for next week is also the help might be there. It sounds like it'll be better next week, but then it will just depend on the weather. So I'm hoping either the 16th or maybe not the 16th, since that's going to be Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And school will be out, it'll be busy here, and we kind of want to close here if we can, so maybe like Tuesday or Wednesday if the weather's good.
Okay, then I'll plan for those, but just keep me posted.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, man. So that was an operator that I work with. He owns one of the merchandisers here, and so he comes in weekly, and we do the collection and the split. But yeah, I mean, there's issues oftentimes with the the UI on these things, but also just when you have, say, 3,000 games, and a lot of them are hacks, they're just it's bad emulation, it's lazy, and but it's also confusing. Like a lot of casual gamers, they just want to know what it is that they're playing and play it. They don't want to sit there scrolling through a menu for 10 minutes to try and find something. And so I've tried some multi-game stuff before that, more official, and they just, never really made money. And so, yeah, I always prefer to have something official, but they're not going to out-earn a Walking Dead or a Jurassic Park or a Cruisin' Blast. No way. Anyways, that was a tangent. But that was something we talked about a bit last year, and so that would be included. You also had the Fun Zone Arcade at the Pizza Ranch opening up in Galesburg, Illinois. Sings Arcade, very interesting kind of a art gallery hybrid arcade that opened in Saint-Anne-de-Bellevue in Quebec, Canada. Galaxy Strikes Bowling Center in Warrenton, Virginia. Monkey Rock Entertainment in El Paso, Texas. More Chuck E. Cheese's, more urban air parks. Level X in Glasgow, Scotland. Not sure why the image isn't showing there. A Game State opened up in Berlin, Germany. But pretty big arcade for Germany. They generally do not have big arcades, and from my understanding, the regulations for opening up an arcade in Germany are very strict, and so make it very expensive. 8-Bit Micro Arcade Bar in Bolton, UK, and this was another place that had arcade one-ups in it. This was an interesting one. I think this is the first time I'd ever reported on a place opening up in Suriname, South America. But this Chuck E. Cheese's, as you can see, this is probably the most interesting looking Chuck E. Cheese exterior in the world. Let me just catch up again on the chat. Yeah, I mean, there's a popularity of ticket gaming, which just so far it's hard to beat that. I mean, in my situation, I do find I have video games that do make good money, and in fact, like my Jurassic Park will out-earn the merchandisers that I have here. And so when there isn't ticket redemption to distract people, then they'll play the video games. It's just when you have the ticket redemption there, it's just too strong of a pull, and so the money that's coming into the arcade will generally gravitate towards the redemption games. And so yeah, it's just kind of the reality there. But the right video game can still hold on its own there. It's just it's hard to say what principle you want to stick to, or how much money you want to make. And let's see. Cabinets that play new games could work. Let's see. For your question, P. Good speed. It depends. Like there's, as John Shi BRPG mentions, like there's the X Arcadia platform, which I've talked about a lot on the blog, on the as well as on the channel, which is offering, there are a lot of older games that are essentially HD remasters, but with some extra content added to them to make them exclusive. And they are working on some actual full exclusives that aren't available in any form on consoles, which should come out this year, like Dynamite Bomb is one. Excuse me. And so there's that. Polycade is another example of one that's been offering some newer games. They essentially have a UI that's kind of like a Steam, but a lot more user-friendly or arcade-friendly. But the content is basically just Steam games on a timer. But I haven't seen any earnings on how well that does. I mean, personally, I don't think one would do well in my arcade. There's another concept that I've seen that's also doing something kind of similar, which is also wanting to bring some new games, but it doesn't want me to talk about that publicly yet, but probably we'll talk about it sometime soon this year. So there are a few concepts out there which are trying to bring newer games out to the arcade on either a digital distribution platform or like X Arcadia. It's a physical distribution with cartridges. It's just in my opinion, it always requires some exclusivity. The more exclusive that the content is, like say, excuse me, if the game is fully exclusive, that's more. What word am I looking for? It's a better draw, has better appeal than something that is available on consoles. But of course, names also go a long way, as I've discovered. You know, so like on my X Arcadia, you know, there aren't a ton of games on there that have huge names yet. Like Samurai Showdown 5 Perfect would be the biggest name that's on there right now, at least for the United States. And that's done all right, but my Kung Fu versus Karate Champ still holds toe-to-toe with it a lot of the time. And so, you know, there's that. And yeah, sorry, just reading through the chat here. It seems like arcade games is making a bit of cultural comeback right now. I haven't seen it in a very long time. Well, I think maybe what it is just some of it's probably driven by nostalgia, but also just the arcade experience is something that has unique aspects to it. It's usually a social sort of atmosphere, and it's a better social atmosphere than what you get online. You know, when people have the anonymous filter on, they can be total douchebags and just treat other people like crap online. And so, and then there's also problems with lag and stuff with your online experience. But of course, people still get over those things. They're fine most of the time with them. But at an arcade, when you have somebody next to you, like in the 15-ish years that I've been doing this, I've never had like a fight break out in the arcade. Knock on wood. Hopefully, I'm not cursing myself. But I've seen total strangers like play with each other on a game. Say like I have my Ninja Turtles right here, or the basketball machine in the back, and then where they just want to play, and it just so happens that they want to play at the same time. It's like, hey, can I join you? And you know, they play and they have a good time, and sometimes friendships can be made from that, or like dance machines are great at that too. And so just the social atmosphere that you get with arcades, I think people are maybe rediscovering that, and also just looking for something different in entertainment, because everybody has streaming at home to entertain them. Everybody has a game console at home. Everybody has a phone to play games on. And, you know, maybe after a while that just gets kind of like, meh, whatever. I'm used to it. Nothing's novel about it. Whereas in the arcade, you can get very interesting novel experiences that you just don't get with other segments of entertainment. And so I think that may be why we're seeing some kind of comeback. And then maybe there's also some cabin fever there. Hi, how's it going? How can I help you? Are you just looking? Nope, I'm sorry, just English. Or Portuguese. Do you want tokens? Guess they're using a Google Translate. Yeah, I'd love to see Shredder's Revenge released to arcades. That would be a great upgrade kit. Now, I did have a Stranger Things pinball, and it did the same as any other pinball. I only regret trading that for something else at this point, because of I learned after I traded it that it's highly valuable. How can I help you? I can't teach you how to play, but there's a price. Yeah, one thing I guess you could call it a criticism of like whether it's XR Arcadia or Polycade or whatever is single player games just aren't a great thing for the U.S. market right now. We need more multiplayer games, but like XR Arcadia is solving that. They just released P47 Aces Mark II, and they do have some multiplayer games and more stuff coming. But like these guys here right now, which I guess they don't speak English, so I'm not able to communicate with them really well because they wanted me to tell them how to play. But yep, you're welcome. As a group of guys, and that's what I see a lot of here at the arcade. I mean, occasionally, yeah, you get a single player coming in, just like the guy playing Adam's Family Pinball right now. But a lot of customers that I've had in today have been in groups, and whether it's date night, whether it's just going to the mall as friends or going to lunch, whatever. Arcades, that's where they excel, and so that's why we have a lot of multiplayer experiences. And in my experience, the single players always struggle to make the money. Like, that's why I got rid of the Star Wars Battle Pod. It was cool, very very cool tech experience and just overall experience, visual, audio, all that stuff. But it just didn't make good money. It could never hold a candle to like Jurassic Park, and part of that was because it was a single-player game. There were some other issues with that too, but yeah, boxing machines would probably be one of the few single-player ones, and that is one place where Redemption excels because the experiences are so short that a single player is fine. But when you have a single-player video game and you can spend few to several minutes playing it, depending on how good you are, they just don't earn as well as something that's multiplayer when you can get $1 out of 4 people at a time in the same amount of time as you would only be able to get out of a single player experience. And of course, if you charge too much for a single player experience, then oftentimes people will balk at that and they won't want to play. So got to find a balance for it there. All right, let's finish up on the location stuff. We had Archie Bros Circuit Electric in Christchurch, New Zealand, and some new locations opening up in Japan. There was this very cool video of a drone fly through on Time Zone. Okay, good. I have the sound off there because so often you get dinged on sound for stupid things on YouTube. It's just very annoying. But I flew this drone quite far. But quite a few drone videos coming out, and I have a mini drone, but I'm definitely not a experienced drone operator yet, so I'll get there one day. But very cool video, and obviously staged inside the time zone as to when people should do stuff and make it look like it was just naturally and authentic there. But yeah, very, very awesome video. All right. Let's see, and then that was October, and for our last location watch in December, it was another busy one. We had Lit Arcade Bar, aka The Lab, opening up in Ogden, and it looks like my image is size needs to be fixed there. And I actually sold some of my games from my Ogden location because this opened in Ogden, a few blocks, several blocks away from where my arcade was there. Huge selection of pinball machines there, but he bought some of my video games, my older ones, and so those have a home there now. And from what he's been telling me on his earnings, it's doing extremely well, but his costs are also very high, and so I guess it's one of those battles. Pints and Play opening up in Blue Springs, Missouri. Another one, lots of Missouri for this year that I'm now realizing. The Lot Beer Company opened in Granville, Ohio. 2-Bit Circus number 2 opened up in Dallas, Texas. So they call this a micro theme park, and they design a lot of their own games. It's headed up by Brent Bushnell, one of Nolan Bushnell's sons, and so they're expanding over into Texas. Subpar Mini Golf opening in Alameda, California, where they originally were in Alameda. That's where the company had started. But I guess they closed it down in Alameda at one point and had the other one near the Ghirardelli chocolate factory there in San Francisco. But they're back in Alameda. Sorry. Lots of FECs that we've reported about this month, opening in various parts of the country: Texas, Ohio, one in Delaware, which is a state I don't report on too often because it's tiny. New Jersey, South Carolina, one in St. Louis, the Armory STL. One issue sometimes with these FECs, and one reason why I just kind of put headline style instead of writing all about it, is oftentimes they don't report much about their arcades, or you can't find any information on an arcade, so it's kind of hard to tell. Let's see, over in Europe, Four Quarters number 3 opening up in Newcastle, UK. Game State number 47 opening in Wrocław, Poland. F1 Arcade opening in in London. But these ones also seem to make some custom arcade cabinets with custom software. Didn't see any like Sega or Namco games there. The Panic Room opening in Gravesend, UK. Three Peaks Entertainment, which I believe was just a temporary pop-up arcade in London. And then Gravity Entertainment opened up in Castleford. For Asia, Middle East, Oceania, we have the Flipside Barcade in Adelaide, Australia. Lots of pinball to play there. I used to have a Doctor Who, but man, that thing was problematic. Broke down all the time. And didn't get played much when it would work. 3 new Masty Zone locations. They have a very strange logo, but opening up in these places in India, which I won't try to pronounce. And then also in India, you have another time zone opening there. Venue 56 Entertainment opening up in Kuwait. And this, I think, was the first time I had reported on a place opening in Kuwait. Of course, obviously not a huge country, so would also probably be why. So those are all the new locations that had opened up all over the United States, all over Europe, UK, mostly in UK. Unfortunately, I've heard of arcades closing their doors in the UK and other parts of Europe. Again, comes back to those electrical costs, where I just heard reported some crazy electrical prices, and I really do feel for those venues that haven't been able to make it. I think it was the Level Up Arcade Bar in Limerick that just announced that they closed as well, and Alameda, yeah, sorry. And so, yeah. Then we get to new games. And so, as I pointed out earlier, and you can catch this on my YouTube channel, there's lots of new games that came out. Of course, that's one great thing about platforms like XR Arcadia or Polycade, is we're able to get a lot more content through these systems. It is a lot harder to track the stuff on Polycade, though, because either they don't report it, or, like I said, it's just straight up console games, and it's just on a timer. And for those, I don't really count those, because I don't think those have been properly designed for the arcade experience. I personally just do not like timer games. So I can help you here.
I just want to get like $1 worth of quarters. Can I do that?
Quarters, or are you playing the prize? Oh, for the little one? Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, no problem. It was in Europe, where I think it was called Level Up Arcade Bar, and in Limerick. I want to say Ireland. I'm not 100% sure, but I did see a tweet from them over the weekend that Ted, who was in the chat earlier, I'm not sure if he's still here, had mentioned. And so they're one, and I know there was another one talking about closing down, I think in January. That was, I think, in London or near London. That just, their electrical costs were so high that they just could not afford to stay open anymore. And so, there have been closures for that. And as I talked about at the beginning of the stream, the main reason I closed down my second location in Ogden, Utah, was just that when I looked at year-on-year earnings, 2022 versus 21, just most of the months of last year, I was making less every single month than I had it. And so it's like you can't sustain that for too long. And I was looking at the numbers. It's like I might go bankrupt, and then I'll have to go close both locations if this continues like this. And our December was really bad. And now maybe the December was bad because at the beginning of the month I announced we were closing, and so maybe that caused some people to not come by. But on the same token, maybe some people did come out and be like, oh, I want to support these guys right before they close. I don't know. But just either way, from May through December, it was a loss every single month. And my costs for operating up there were much higher than it is in this location, despite the fact that city is smaller. By like this city here, it's somewhere around 150,000 people, whereas up in Ogden it's like 70 to 80,000 for the city proper. And of course there's more people in the surrounding areas, but still, yeah. But for new games, now of course there wouldn't be new games being made for the arcade industry if there weren't locations for them to be sold to. And so that's one point that I've brought up pretty much ever since I joined Arcade Heroes and took over the site, that you just, people like Eugene Jarvis or companies like Sega, Bandai Namco, they would not be making these games if nobody was buying them, or you were just selling them to like millionaire athletes or to Jeff Bezos. And it's like, yeah, sometimes guys like that will buy arcades for their mansions, but for the most part, it wouldn't be enough sales to warrant manufacturing thousands of cabinets. And so the reason why these games exist is because there are locations for them to be sold into. And so, for the games that were released last year, you had Arcade Collection by Incredible Technologies that launched in August. There is a home non-coin version of this, but it's the exact same commercial cabinet, just doesn't have a coin door. But this has 3 games on it: Silver Strike Bowling, Power Putt Golf, and gosh, it's escaping me now. Target Toss Lawn Darts thing. Yeah, sorry. I guess on the Level Up thing, sorry. Yeah, that was a European one, and I don't know how many locations out there in the world are called Level Up this or that. Probably quite a few. Let's see. Astro Ninja Man Exa released in September, and this was based on a NES homebrew, and so this would be like a retro game that's brand new for arcade cabinets. And I played this at IAPA, and it's fun. Very quirky, different, easy to play as well. And it's a cheaper title, too. That's one thing that I do like about platforms like the X-Arcadia or even Polycade, is that it does cost you a lot less to get these games oftentimes. Like this one is somewhere around $600 for the cartridge. Of course, yeah, you need the cabinet and the system, but ATV Slam Standard launched on February 16th from Sega. Cactus Canyon Remake, which I personally enjoyed, thought it was really cool. Launched in February from Chicago Gaming Company. Cotton Rock and Roll Exa launched on February 8th. I know, one of the exclusive things about this is it added a 2-player mode, so that does not exist on the PC version, which I saw somebody commenting that the PC version's been fixed or something. And Crazy Rafting by Wallop and Sega Amusements launched in April, and then I got some footage of that at IAPA 2022. Although every time I tried to play it, it wouldn't work for me, so I didn't get a chance to actually play it. Let's see. Crimson Katana Exa Label, the classic cave shoot 'em up, launched on February 17th for X-Arcadia. And Fast and Furious Arcade by Raw Thrills. This was the first new game that they had launched all year. And first since King Kong VR, I believe. And so a lot of people complained about that second display, but having played it in person, I did notice it seemed to create kind of an odd immersion effect. Kind of like the Star Wars Battle Pod with the dome screen, where just in your peripheral vision, now granted, human vision, it's more widescreen than it is vertical screen, but still, just with that screen there, it does seem to create kind of an immersive effect. And so let's see, Galaxy Rangers, kind of a Halo-like shoot 'em up game, which does have redemption support, I should say. Launched in September, and also played that at IAPA. Got footage of it. Got footage of most of these games on my channel if you haven't seen them and you're interested in them. Golden Tee PGA Tour by Incredible Technologies launched in February, although they, I think at first they were including TVs with it, and then they stopped. And so if you order one, you have to buy your own TV for it. James Bond 007 launched in September, but of course this is the Pro and the Premium, the new limited edition 60th anniversary model. Has a completely different design. Just launched this month, last week, I guess. Let's see, Maximum Tune 5DX Plus, as I mentioned, also launched as both a kit and dedicated back in January and February, and I do have that sitting right here next to the desk. Mission Impossible Arcade Deluxe launched on January 3rd. I did actually consider getting this. May still one day. Let's see, Neo Tris by Chips on Steroids for the Neo Geo MVS, and so it's also on the AES as well. But if you want Tetris action on your AES or MVS, there you go. Nidhogg 2 by DSM Arcade launched in August. As far as I'm aware, nothing was changed about the software for this. It was mainly just putting that particular game in a cabinet. I've heard a lot about Nidhogg. I've never played it, so nothing's unique about the Maxitune 5 DX Plus dedicated. It's just a dedicated model for any location that didn't already have a Maximum Tune 5 and didn't want to get that upgrade. I mean, one thing I did not care for on the kit was how much that costs. It's like, gosh, that's a lot of money for for that. And the particular cabinet on Maximum Tune 5, it's a variation of the Mario Kart cabinet. I think the core cabinet itself is the same as Mario Kart, and then just some things changed on it for the dashboard and the steering wheel, the Band & Passport card reader, as well as the dispenser, stuff like that. And so be interesting when Maximum Tune 7 comes along to see if they do a kit version for existing Maximum Tune 5s, or if we all have to get dedicated versions. If that's the case, I'm not sure if I'll be getting a 7. We have Noise Arcuda for the X Arcadia that launched in June. This very unique game that is a shoot 'em up and a rhythm game, and this is one I have to play more of at a expo. Usually I'm recording somebody else playing it. Oh, I see what you mean. Gotcha. Yeah, so yeah, it would be a second gen. Let's see, P47 Aces Mark II launched in September, and while this did exist on as an arcade game from '96, I think it was, like, this version is so different. I would call this very much a full exclusive. It includes the original arcade game on it, but they created new modes for it that are definitely not from the original, like the 4-player mode, widescreen, all that stuff. Pac-Man Battle Royale Championship by Bandai Namco. The standard launched in June. Deluxe launched in August. Of course, the deluxes were available to Dave & Buster's as a timed exclusive for a while. And I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on this, because this does change the gameplay from Battle Royale quite a bit. And so it has scoring, and so this one, I mean, this cabinet here, if you see it in a dark room, like that lab place that I mentioned, they have one, and that was the first time I had seen it in a dark place, and it's very impressive because they have some animated LED strips on the sides, which look great, and of course the control panels themselves also have LEDs in them, and it's not overdoing the LED thing. Like, I have an original Battle Royale sitting here. It has no LEDs on it, so like this would definitely attract a lot more attention. So this is one I am also considering getting at some point, because they do have an upgrade kit. So if you have an existing Battle Royale like I do, you can get one of these and then put them back to back, and then you have 8 players. And so but yeah, that is a good word for it. It's chaotic, and so I've noticed, at least at trade shows, when no money's on the line, people will just kind of walk up to it, play it a little bit, then walk away. But I'm sure in a
pay situation, it's always different. We have Racecraft Evo, which had previously been released in Europe, released through ICE. And although last I checked, they still don't have this on their website, but it's showing up on distributor websites. So as far as I'm aware, it is actually available. But F1 style racing, which used to be the only kind of racer you'd find in arcades, at least back in the 80s, and then just kind of went away, and then everything wanted to try and be more Daytona for obvious reasons. Rush, which we talked about by Stern, launched in February. Samurai Showdown Perfect 5 Perfect launched on September 29th. Shadow Games X, which is kind of like the first Shinobi or Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja, launched in May. And so one thing that I know is different from the console version is the addition of the female ninja, and it plays alternating. So like if you do 2 players, one person takes a turn, plays. When they're done, then the next person does. So it's been a long time since we've seen that kind of gameplay. Skyriders launched in January for the US. It had already been available in Europe and, of course, China. And this is like Prop Cycle, so I hope that Amusement Source International brings this to the next Amusement Expo so that I can try it out, film it. And they also brought Sniper Strike 2 to the States in September, which was at IAPA. Stripes by Polycade. This was a time exclusive for them, a puzzle game. And let me zoom in on the flyer here. And so this reminds me of an old NES game called Pipe Dream, I think it was. And I guess it's similar gameplay, but I tried to find footage of this and I could not find it. It seems like nobody has it. And they did say that it was supposed to hit Steam, but I checked Steam and I couldn't find it. So I guess maybe they decided to do it longer as a Polycade exclusive than they originally were talking about. We had Throwback. I think this is pronounced High Heroes. You want to say Jai-Alai, but I think it's Highly, or Highly, maybe. So sorry. But by Astro Crow Game. Excuse me. This is an indie-made game. Indie Arcade Wave on YouTube recently did an interview with the artist and the game designer, the coder of this one, and they've been working on it for years and finally got it out the door. So very bright cabinet, and so if you know what that sport is, then now there's a video version of it and exclusively in arcades. I couldn't find a picture of the 4-player model, but they do have this available as either a 2-player or a 4-player one. Toy Story 4 by Joyzy Jack Pinball, launched in June. Very nice looking pinball machine, but way too expensive for a location in my opinion. But if there is anybody out there operating one and it's doing great for you, I'd love to hear about it. But it's just, again, in my experience, it seems like it doesn't matter which type of cabinet you buy, like if it's limited edition or premium or pro. Like I have some pros that earn the same as premiums, and so that's where I've kind of just given up on buying premiums, even if they're better games, just because consumers don't seem to care. There was Toho Perfect Sakura Fantastica by Team Shanghai Alice and X Arcadia, launching for that platform on July 28th. From all reports I've heard, this is a huge release in Japan. Don't know how many people really know about this here in the States, but yeah, it's done very well in Japan, just like Dodonpachi. True Death Exolabel also did extremely well over there. So they still love shoot-'em-ups in Japan, but not so much here, unfortunately. Weird Al's Museum of Natural Hilarity launched somewhere around May or June. It was kind of hard to determine when this started rolling off the production line, because initially I heard that some orders wouldn't be fulfilled until like spring 2023. But I've heard some interesting things about this one. I mean, I grew up as a big Weird Al fan. I've been to one of his concerts before too, and always a lot of fun. But if you're not familiar with P3 Multimorphic, it's a hybrid mechanical pinball playfield, and they also make these to be able to they're available as kits, so like you can change the artwork, you can change the playfield out with a different one. And so but I've not seen one. I don't know if I ever will see one in person. I'm not sure if I would get one for my location as much as I personally like Weird Al. It might do well. I'm just not sure how this sort of hybrid thing would do on location for the cost. Then you had Zombieland by Coastal Amusements, which was also at IAPA. And I do know that I need to finish properly updating this for Asian releases. For the most part, a lot of them were ex-Arcadia releases, but there was some other stuff like Tunatham New Plus, Tunatham Sun by Sega that launched. Dance Around by Konami launched in March. I need to put the new Jita Dora game on there. Hypercross, a snowmobiling racing game, which I really thought would be at IAPA, but it wasn't. Launched in China in August. Milk Chan, which was, I think, a platformer game for Sega's APM3. And let's see if there was anything else. So, yeah, Rumblestorm X for the Hot Pink Club, which I cannot show on YouTube without getting in trouble or getting the video restricted. But I know there are some other games. Again, I need to look at Arcade Belgium to get that all properly sorted out. And then Europe, I think, was a very similar release list as to the United States, but they're like with UDC, they brought in some games that haven't been released here yet, like Dream Ball, which uses these giant track balls, and I think it might be something like a kind of a monkey ball style game. Not 100% sure on that one, or I don't remember. They also had UDC also released Slime Busters. So like actually tomorrow is EAG over in the UK, and so there might be some new stuff that's showing up there, some brand new games. If so, I'll talk about it on the blog, maybe do a video as well. But Sega sent out an email saying what they were bringing there. I didn't see anything that wasn't at IAPA, and so if there is anything new, I would expect it to come from a distributor like UDC or Electrocoin. All right. And then, of course, there was Videmption stuff. Bobblehead Baseball by Andamiro, Carnival Cups Crane by Touch Magics, Carnival Cup Street, or a smaller version of that game by Touch Magics, Carnival Wheel by Team Play, basically like Big Bass Wheel, but instead of the wheel being printed, just static art, it's LED panels, and so it's a very impressive looking game. And Galaxy Rangers, as already mentioned, Jumanji by Sega, kind of a multi-game thing. I have a video of that. Men in Black also launched in March, or sorry, Jumanji was May, Men in Black was March, both Sega. Wicked Tuna by Eunice launched in May. And then you had Zombie Bowling by Amusement Source International in August, and Zombieland again in September. And then let's see, everything else. It had All-Stars Basketball by Sega Amusements, which I guess technically was a video game. Asphalt 9 Legends VR, Arcade VR, which also I probably should put in the arcade column. The Exa Arc 1 cabinet. Now, I did make a mistake early on calling this the Arc 01 cabinet. This is actually the Arc 1 cabinet. Now, I wouldn't mind selling the one two-player, or trading the two-player Exa cabinet that I have for one of these Arc 1 ones. I like them. And they're modular. You can move the orientation of the screen. You can change out the control panel really easily. So that's cool. Hit the Green. Very cool punching and kicking game where you have to hit the targets that are green, not the red ones, for points. Jet Ball, which is like the few years ago, or almost a decade now actually, there was a wave of beer pong arcade games, and the only one that really seemed to survive was this Air Technologies, where they have this jet pong game, which has been popular in bars from what I hear. And Jet Ball is basically the same thing, but instead of having the beer pong plastic cups, it has basketball hoops, like 3 of them in the back, and so you just have to, toss your ping pong ball or bounce it into the hoops for points. So nice little variation. Football Frenzy, this is a VR game. Video of this on my channel from IAPA. First football video game we've had in years, which is strange to me, given how popular American football is. That why we don't have another like NFL Blitz or something kind of like that. or even it's surprising to me how popular soccer is all over the planet except for the United States, and how we don't have more soccer video games anymore. So it's like, to me, that's something that, since X Arcadia has a relationship with SNK, they should do another Ultimate 11, in my opinion. Pac-Man Baller by Bandai Namco, a basketball game that does have a video screen in the back, or an LED screen. Cubix, which is this big room, a projection map room. It wraps around the 3 sides, and you play a video game. They're going to release more content for that. I already mentioned Rumble Storm X, a very raunchy shoot 'em up. A SpongeBob SquarePants VR Bubble Coaster, so another SpongeBob VR game by a Brazilian company called Rylix. And, excuse me, VR Agent by 3 Mind Wave and Sega Amusements. Launched in February, and this has already been influential, as it influenced Zombieland Headshot Fever by VRsenal that came out in November. But as I mentioned in the video about that, I criticized the Zombieland one because the frame rate was just bad, so hopefully they've fixed that piece of software. But yeah, I mean, VR Agent's been out for a little while, so you might see one out there soon. As I recall, the pricing on it was something like $28,000, so it is a bit pricey. But of course, everything VR is pricey, and so there's nothing below $20,000 when it comes to VR, and a lot of them are $50,000. I mean, there's some that are in the $40,000 range, but to me, once you're past 20, it's kind of hard to continue justifying it. But that's because I'm poor. But yeah, that kind of covers a lot of 2022. I guess I should go over the top 10 arcade stories from the year. A few location watches were actually on here. October was number 10, July number 8, March was number 4, and excuse me, number 9 was the IAPA 2022 Roundup. Number 1, number 2, I guess, got the shaft. Nobody was interested. Always interesting to me when a News Bites shows up on one of the most viewed stories. I'm not sure what might have driven people to that. Maybe it was the Arcade 1-Up Pro. Maybe it was Funhouse 2.0. I have no idea. X Arcadia launching the new Arc 1 cabinet and games at IAPA 2022 is number 6. And Scooby-Doo launching... Oh, I missed that on the games list now that I realize it, so I need to go and fix that too. They launched Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Into Pinball, and that one looks fun. It just, for me, it's always hit and miss when I'll see a spooky game because they never go to arcade trade shows. So I have to find them at like a bar arcade somewhere. And let's see. New details on Fast and Furious Arcade by Raw Thrills is number 3. Dave & Buster's brings Top Gun Maverick to their VR platform, number 2. A Dave & Buster's story is almost always in the top 3 every year. So I look forward to the next thing that they do. But it does, I don't know, it seems like aside from that, they haven't done much post-pandemic that's been like exclusive to them. But they've been doing a lot with the VR stuff. But I'm not sure how much more they're going to be putting into that. I hear different things about how much VR actually makes, like versus how much it might cost to maintain it, and it's all over the place. So I don't know what to believe all the time. And then number 1, the top story on ArcadeHeroes.com, which I've already had sitting here, so it's not a surprise. Adrenaline Amusements debuting NFS Heat Takedown at IAPA 2022, which was a big surprise. I mean, everybody probably remembers or has played the old Global VR Need for Speed games when they brought those to the arcade back in the 00s. And the last one that had been in the arcade was Need for Speed Carbon. And so it's been a long hiatus. Interestingly enough, I found out Global VR somehow is still in business. Like, they haven't released a new game since 2014, but they still exist to be able to provide support and parts for their old games. And so I'm very surprised by that. But yeah, this one is the one game that it seems like out of all the stuff that was unveiled at IAPA, because there was a lot of games, like there was the Fast and Furious Arcade, which actually had been unveiled at Bowl Expo, but I couldn't attend because my brother got COVID, and then I had to stay here, had to cancel that. But that was the first time I got to see it. It was also the first time I think they had ever shown 4 of them next to or linked together, and you can actually link up to 8, which would be really crazy to see. But I know that there's a place opening up in Tampa, I think this spring, where I saw a picture where they already have 4 of the Fast and Furious set up. I think they actually bought the ones that were at IAPA. And then Sega, as I already mentioned, Drone Racing Genesis and Storm Rider 2. Bandai Namco has Dead Heat Unleashed. Trying to remember, it seems like there was another racing one. There's so many that it was hard to nail them all down. But then, of course, Need for Speed just does seem like that Need for Speed name attached to it, plus the game is really drawing people. And interestingly enough, if you go to the to aagames.com, the Adrenaline Amusements website, and you go to NFS, they have it here. Now, from what I was told, this one is launching sometime in the spring, but I may need to follow up with them on that and see if it's actually launching sooner. And then I think it was... Oh, yeah. So if you go to Bandai Namco Amusements Europe, they have a much nicer picture than the one that I had shared recently of the deluxe version. And so this actually has a motion base. And what I was told is that there was a game that they had been developing, that Adrenaline had been developing, called Drakons. And it was a game where you would fly around on a dragon. And it was kind of like the Blazing Angels arcade, if any of you remember that Global VR did, where it was kind of an open area sort of thing. It wasn't an on-rails game. It was an off-rails, I guess is the correct term. And so, but you were riding a dragon and shooting things, I think. But I guess it wasn't testing very well. But it did have a motion base, and so they're actually taking that motion base and putting it into Need for Speed Takedown. And now, I know this has been testing somewhere in Canada and maybe even in the United States. I've heard different people say different things about their feelings on the cabinet. I mean, it is a little unusual because it doesn't say, like, Need for Speed. You know, it's saying NFS. I do wonder how many casuals out there know what NFS stands for. I mean, obviously gamers know what that means. But I mean, from my observations at IAPA, the LED screens were very cool to see. And obviously this was kind of their way as... hitting at Fast and Furious Arcade using the 2 screens, but just feels like there should be something saying Need for Speed more often there, but that's just my... so the Asphalt 9, the VR version does have a takedown mode, and in the video that I recorded of that at IAPA, it shows the takedown mode being played. But I found it was very fun. I liked the game. I mean, the graphics are obviously top-notch, and that's one advantage of doing a console port. But, I mean, this software is not... It's not just the console port and calling it a day. They had to change a lot of things about it so that it works for the arcade, and it does. And so it looks great, and it plays great. I don't have any complaints about the handling. One of my favorite things about this game from what I played was the sound system, and it's noticeably better than anything else that I played at IAPA as far as racing games go. And the takedown mode in Asphalt 9 is not in the... It is exclusive to the VR version, and so it's not on those. But sorry, I'm just catching up here really quick. So it's an LED marquee. It's just and they were saying that it had probably a good 6 more months of development time on it. So I know it would change. It's just the software version they had at IAPA, it almost never said the game on it, like even in a tracked mode. And I get it, during the gameplay you don't need it to be saying that, but it just... But yeah, those LED screens looked great, and you can see them in the video that I did of that one. It's just, I'm sure it'll change from what you see here, from what you saw at at IAPA. I mean, obviously these mock-ups don't show the split in the screens or the micro LEDs or anything, but they look very nice. And so generally during gameplay, at least with the IAPA build, it just shows the photo of the player and what place they currently are occupying in the race. And again, it's fun to smash into cars, take them down, that sort of thing. I don't recall there being damage modeling, but maybe there was, or maybe that's something they would add later. Has a giant boost button on it, and at least from this looks like it doesn't have a brake. But again, most arcade racers actually don't need brakes. So, yeah, I mean, it would be nice if there were more supercars, but that's probably down to licensing, where they can't get more. And only 5 tracks. And I always don't mind seeing a little bit more if they can do it, but again, I do understand when costs and things. But I've never played the console version of NFS Takedown, and so I don't know how many tracks it has there either, how many can be adapted to it. But yeah, so that seems to be the most popular one out of everything. Of course, Raw Thrills has their stuff coming. They already have them listed on the website, although my understanding is like Halo Fireteam Raven, the new model, like this one is replacing like the Super Deluxe one, and then they'll have a 2-player version to probably replace this at some point. This isn't coming until spring, and that's what's weird is they say now available, but I reached out to somebody I know at Raw Thrills. I was like, so does this mean it's actually shipping now? But he said, no, it's like now available-ish. It's available to order, but it's not shipping yet, and it won't ship until, from again, what they're saying, springtime. Yeah, Asphalt 9's lots of supercars. I'm sure that cost them one reason why that game is a bit expensive is because of the licensing, I imagine. MotoGP VR. Oh yeah, that was another racing game that I forgot about. And there's only criticism I could have about this, and again, this one's launching in the spring, so maybe the software will change by then, but just like the graphics looked pretty much the same as they did from 2015. And so, but granted, there would be differences given that it's VR, and so there is more horsepower that they have to put in there, but I don't know if they can add any more with lighting effects and whatnot. And then already discussed Fast and Furious Arcade. Somebody had asked in one stream about a Chapter 4 for King Kong, and I think I did get a response on that saying it would be coming, but they just didn't know when. So there's that. I mean, for Bandai Namco, and this is the European side. Of course, there's, again, with EAG tomorrow, there might be more stuff popping up, but not really seeing it. And now, if this confuses you as to why would Bandai Namco be listing all these products that have nothing to do with them, it's because they're a distributor in Europe, and so they just sell. If you own an arcade in Europe and you want like a Raw Thrills game, you want an Adrenaline game, then you have to go through Bandai Namco Amusements Europe to purchase them. And so, and yeah, I agree, the BNAE website looks really nice. I mean, the Bandai Namco American side did change recently. It's also nicer than it definitely looked before. And if you hadn't seen the standard version of Championship, so they have a great picture of it there. And here's the deluxe version. And so I guess it just depends on your budget and your space as to which one you might want to go with. They have Dead Heat Unleashed here. I think that's on the European side. I'm kind of surprised it's not at the top. There it is, yeah. And yeah, I'm not seeing anything else that's like new other than this Need for Speed Takes. So most likely at EAG tomorrow. I think it's in London. Pretty sure it's in London. It's always in London. One of these years I'll find a way to get over there for EAG. But yeah, they'll probably debut this there. But on the American side, you know, it's slightly different setup. But as you can see, good reason why they have Mario Kart in front of Maximum Tune. It's because, again, Mario Kart sells thousands more units than Maximum Tune does, sadly, which sucks. But, you know, it's Mario Kart, so it's kind of a no-brainer there. But yes, Maximum Tune does deserve to sell more units. It's just, it's a hard pill for a lot of operators to swallow, especially when they have that available there. And also jump over to Sega here. So I do want to upgrade my Pac-Man Battle Royale to Championship, as I think it would do fine. But the sorry, I should adjust this. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Mario Kart's a casual racer, and that's one reason why it just does well. Like I imagine if I had one, it'd probably be my number one racer. But back on Pac-Man. But yes, some of you know I have a never released prototype build of Pac-Man Battle Royale. I like to call it the Tournament Edition. And so it just made some minor changes to the gameplay of the original Battle Royale, where you could have 3 other CPUs to play against in case you were playing. Now, it didn't have like a score like Pac-Man would, but at the end of every game, it was different how it would show. It would show like a first, second, third, and fourth place, as opposed to, like, I think the released software was something more like who ate the most fruit, who ate the most dots, who ate the most ghosts, something like that. And so it just changed that. So it was a little bit more competitive. What I would like to do is just take that and put it into a different cabinet. So I actually have an old Allied Tank Attack that the software crapped out on that. And so I've just kind of have it sitting in the back. I really need to dismantle the seat part of the cabinet and sell the parts off on eBay or someplace. I need to do that with a few other things too, as well. I need to sell stuff off to make space. But the monitor portion of that cabinet is still good. And so what I would like to do is make a 4-player control panel that would look like it's supposed to belong to the cabinet, maybe with a wood shop or something. And then put my prototype version of Battle Royale into that. And then, still have that, so that way if somebody maybe doesn't care about Championship, they could play that, or I could put it on a location somewhere, a route somewhere. So interesting. See, I wouldn't have assumed that Maxatoon would get picked over Mario Kart a lot, but I mean, in my location I have a Cruise and Blast next to my Maximum Tune, and the earnings are almost the same week to week. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, when it comes to yearly earnings, I think Maximum Tune would have been my number one game had the game not crapped out for a month. Back in May, both computers just died, and I had to send them in to Namco to get looked at. Unfortunately, there were some problems with delays in getting them looked at. And what was really frustrating is they said they couldn't find a problem with them. And it's like, well, there obviously is something wrong here. And so eventually they ended up sending one of them back, but then they sent me a different computer just to see if it would work, and the other one did. But yeah, like, I mean, I do see a lot of people play Maximum Tune, and part of it's the licensed cars, part of it's the stick shifter, part of it's just it's a more serious game than what you would get with like Cruise and Blast. But again, Cruise and Blast still holds up just fine. I mean, I did see it dip just a little bit after the console port came out, but it still is the same fun game, and so it still does fine. But when people want something satisfying as far as something to come back to over and over again, like I see far more people come back to Maximum Tune than any other game that I have, and so its replay value is just through the roof, and it has the most dedicated fan base, and so that goes a long way. It's just, yeah, I mean, there are different players that will focus on the story mode. Some will do the online ghost battles. Like, I have a gentleman who comes in every single weekend, every Saturday, most Sundays. He has been coming in a little less lately, but he'll just play Maximum Tune for the most part. He'll drop $15, $20 into it. And what he's usually doing is playing for crowns. And so that's one of the things that I love about Maximum Tune is the competitive aspects that keep people coming back. I want to maintain my crowns. or the special events, like they just did an event last month where you would race against ghosts from Australia and be able to unlock stuff, digital items, not NFTs, but digital items that you could add to your car, like a new license plate. And so, so like when it comes to how much time people spend on machines, like Maximum Tune usually gets it. Just, I know I have offended some people because since the game's right here, I can tell when people are being really rough with the shifter, and I really do not want to pay the $1,000 or whatever it is to replace the stick shifters when they break. And so I always do my best to ask nicely as I can. It's just I have to raise my voice because the arcade is noisy, and sometimes people just don't seem to understand that for some reason. They're like, why are you yelling at me? It's like, well, no, I'm trying to speak over the machine, because otherwise when I say please don't do that to the stick shifter, or please be nice to the stick shifter, you don't hear me if I'm talking with a library voice. And or even like the game is loud, like it's not super loud sitting next to it, although you can hear it down the hall in the mall, but when you're sitting at the machine itself and you have that surround sound going on, oftentimes you just can't hear what other people are saying. But it's one of those things that I don't want people to break it. But all the time, every single day, somebody comes in and slams the shifter, and so I'm lucky that it hasn't broken yet. But yeah. But yeah, I love the things that they've put into Maximum Tune. I love how much gameplay there is. I love that it's an exclusive game to arcades. To me, out of all the racers that I've played, including the ones that I APA, it's still my favorite racer. And if I had to pick, I'd play it over NFS Heat Takedown. But it's just they've done a great job at building something that people really come back to. And there are things that I wish other arcade companies would copy from Maximum Tune, that other than showing which direction, what turn is coming up. Like they all copy that now, or how many meters to the goal or feet to the goal or whatever it is. And hello, Julian Anakin Films. And so it has a very dedicated fan base. Now, how much of the fan base is growing, I don't know. I have noticed here that there has been a lot of organic growth. Like, I get a lot of new players all the time. But, of course, how many of them become those regulars, it's always hard to say. But the events help. The design of the game helps. And so, I am hoping that Maximum Tune 7, will have a upgrade kit and a reasonably priced one, so that us guys here in the States can update that when it comes along, and hopefully also the gameplay is up to snuff for that too, because again, sounds like some people were not fully satisfied with 6, and now with Dead Heat Unleashed, it is being done by the Maximum Tune team, so there is a very good chance that how Dead Heat Unleashed looks is also how Maximum Tune 7 would look. I don't know if it is the exact same engine, but it seems like that would make sense to save money. Yeah, and also, if you can port your data over. Yeah, Namco is a little weird when it comes to their volume. Like, their volume settings don't make any sense, because like my Pac-Man Battle Royale, I think I had it at like 2 or 3, and it's like super loud. And you set it to the max, and it's like about to blow out the speakers, but it's also so freaking loud, like people on the other end of the mall could hear it. And so I keep a lot of mine at the lower levels because they are loud already. Weirdest thing from the Ogden location that comes to mind when I bring that up is I had an employee. He quit on me, and he gave me his 2 weeks, and then he just didn't show up the next day. So it was kind of like, well, thanks, jerk. I don't know why you did that. And but he had this bizarre thing where he wanted the arcades to be very quiet. He wanted all the attract modes off. He didn't like loud sound from stuff, and he'd even gotten into an argument with a game store there that had some arcade machines, and I guess went and unplugged one because he thought it was too loud. And it's like, arcades are not supposed to be libraries. And so it's not your whisper voice in an arcade. They are noisy, and if that's not for you, then yeah, I guess it shouldn't work at one, which maybe that's why he decided to quit like that. But anyways, I didn't have a great experience with employees, unfortunately, in that situation. But yeah, is there anything else you guys want to talk about from 2022? Yeah, it should be a complete and total expectation with the job. It was really bizarre to me when he was asking if we could turn the attract volume down on everything, because it's like, well, there is a reason we have them. Now, like, I do try to keep it from being too loud, and I like to hear myself think. But and maybe I'm being a little callous as far as I'm so used to working in an arcade that I don't even notice a lot of this stuff. I mean, yeah, some attract modes do drive me crazy because they're so short and they're so repetitive. Like, particularly if they say something. Like, Sega is guilty of this a lot of the time. Like, House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn is a bit annoying because how do you feel? Cool, yeah. You hear that like every 3 minutes, and that does get a little grating. And so like that I totally get, and I also, again, I don't try to have my attract modes up high. I mean, I will have the volume up at a good decent level. I mean, you need to be able to hear the game, and then of course you need to be able to hear the games over all the other games too, and just arcade chatter. But these are the exact opposite of libraries, and so I try to manage the noise levels so they're not too bad or too annoying. But again, yeah, just if there's any arcade coder developer out there in the sound of my voice on attract modes, like one thing I do like about Raw Thrills games is their attract modes are fairly long, but they also have the option to do occasional sound, and so like after every like 3 or 4 cycles it does the sound. But a lot of the Japanese ones, it's either on or it's off, and it's annoying because their track modes are often very short. They often have voice, say the character saying something, and so those are ones that can be a little difficult to ignore or just let blend in with the rest of the noise. I know Step Maniacs is a great one, because it seems to cycle through a lot of the songs, and of course where it's having monthly updates adding new songs, that it also throws those in there, whereas like my DDR Extreme, it's like 4 or 5 songs total. It's just always repeating those, or when people are constantly leaving it in the game selection menu, or they only play one song and then for some reason they walk away and don't play their next songs, and so it'll just sit there at the one first default song. And so it's like, when I hear that, I have wander over, hit the button a few times to choose a different song and just let it play. Right. Or yeah, there are those games that scream out really loud. Like Namco ones will really do this when they, like, I remember the Star Wars Battle Pod when it had a problem. It was a very loud voice, but now, of course, it had to be super loud because the game was enclosed, and so you wouldn't be able to hear it otherwise. But anytime it had a major technical issue, like the lamp going out or something, it would scream at you. And I remember, I think it was Raw Thrills used to have that happen. It doesn't do it anymore, but I want to say like Tokyo Drift. No, maybe it was just during the install when you had to install it. It had this loud robotic voice, but yeah, I think, it's probably worse with redemption games, and since I don't really have many redemption games, that's not much of an issue. Well, I mean, I have a couple of Videmption games which I put on amusement mode, like Space Warp 66 and Galaga Assault. I mean, the Space Warp, I would like to make a longer attract mode, or have some different music, or switch it, or allow it to do the occasional thing, because that one gets a little grating too. But yeah, I can't. From what I recall, when I used to work at an FEC that had a lot of redemption stuff, yeah, it could get annoying with a lot of those pushers and merchandisers. There was this sports one from the mid '90s that had this song that was just super short, super repetitive, and got burned into my brain. Like if I heard it right now, I'd instantly think of that game. I can't remember what it was called, but it drove me crazy. Favorite arcade game to come out in the past 10 or so years? I mean, technically, Darius Burst, Another Chronicle, which came out, I think, 2010, came out in the States here in 2011, is one of my absolute favorites. But with Maximum Tune 5, it's a little hard as to which one I might choose between the favorites. I might have spent a little bit more time on Darius Bursts, but Maximum Tune certainly gets that edge. I also really like Vitra Hexa for the X Arcadia. In a way, it has a lot of Darius vibes there. And yeah, it's just really good. And I also do like Step Maniacs. I'm not good. I'm not coordinated enough at dancing games, so I haven't played it a lot. But, I love the cabinet. I love the content. I love the little features that they've made. They have an app for players, which I need to do more promotion of and everything. I did have some customers complaining about it yesterday, though, or Saturday, where they really didn't like the middle button, the middle foot pad. And I guess they're just so used to DDR, which doesn't have that center panel, that they didn't like it, and so they went and played DDR instead. But I do like it a lot. Dang, $200 on Maxitune. Yeah, I do remember a few years back when sometime after H2 Overdrive had come out, that there was a player that had spent over $600 on that, and it was because it had a really good ranking system, and I think it was like Fleet Admiral or something was the top one, but to get that top rank, you had to spend like $600 or something like that. And so operators obviously would love that, more of that sort of thing, and that's kind of an odd thing, because like for a while you had a lot of arcade games doing achievements, in the 70s you had some games doing ranks and such, like named ranks, not like S or A or B, but like, depending on what the game was. I think Atari's Outlaw would give you a name rank depending on how well you did, and or there was the famous Star Raiders. It wasn't an arcade game, but that would give you like commander or captain or fleet commander, stuff like that, depending on your performance in the game. And that's something I miss seeing in a lot of games too, and so I think that's a great way to get replay value. But there's a very good chance that the 2023 Arcade Game of the Year would be NFS Heat Takedown. Does anybody have a Game of the Year for 2022? Well, speaking of voice acting, I wouldn't mind doing voice acting for like arcade games. So if there's any arcade game developer out there who wants somebody to do voiceovers, I would be. You go ahead, you can hire me. But maybe some other stuff too. I've actually been thinking about something with a audiobook, and doing something like that. So yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, that is one thing that is difficult to say with when releases should be considered Game of the Year, because it is difficult for a lot of players to come across games, because a game might come out in say 2020 and you don't come across it until 2023, and so that's where it is difficult for us to pick games of the year. I totally get that, and so sure, if you want to. There's nobody doing arcade awards out there, like the Game Awards show that happened, a few weeks ago. They completely ignored the arcade industry. But Yeah, it's. I guess I would be the only ones. Or Kevin Williams was in the chat earlier. I know he and a distributor back in the day were doing awards, but since that distributor is out of business, they stopped doing that. But maybe I should talk with Kevin, and we should be doing like an Arcade Heroes award. And I've done polls in the past on the site. I remember back in 2010, I did a Game of the Year or Game of the Decade poll, as well as a Game of the Year. I guess I stopped doing a lot of those polls just because a lot of people complain. It's like, well, I haven't played most of these games, and I haven't seen them anywhere near me, so I can't really vote on this. And so I get that. But if you have played anything that what would make it a Game of the Year for you, or Game of the Decade, and in case anybody's curious, what won Game of the Decade for the zeros or the double O's was H2 Overdrive. So yeah, that's what the players picked. So do developers that make new games develop their games on a PC or a common platform, kind of like the Taito Type X? So yeah, everything these days is a PC. Like even the X Arcadia, it's a PC at its core. You generally where the differences come into play would be like the configuration, but like the I/O boards can make a difference, and so like how low the input lag is thanks to the I/O board, or how many inputs it can handle and stuff. And so of course I know that's not very exciting, and so like sites like system16.com, they generally don't cover any of the new stuff because they're just like, these are just all PCs, but that does mean that all the tools available for PCs are available for arcade game developers, and so it allows them to do stuff. Now, a lot of arcade developers still make their own engines, like Play Mechanics and Raw Thrills. I believe they still focus on their own in-house engines as opposed to doing like Unreal Engine. I think Minecraft Dungeons Arcade might have been one exception to that. I can't remember. But otherwise, for the most part, they're always just doing something in-house and letting everybody work on that. But they still are a PC, and a lot of them use Linux, at least here in the States, whereas most Japanese developers seem to use Windows, like Windows embedded stuff. And now Sega has used the latest versions of Unreal many times. I believe Scarlet Dawn's Unreal Engine 4. I know the new Storm Riders 2 is Unreal Engine 4. I don't think anybody's done anything with Unreal Engine 5 yet in the arcade business. But yeah, it is a small community for sure. Dragon Ball is an arena fighter game. That's any of that coming overseas? Yeah, I would probably not on Dragon Ball Z, or like there's one that's really, really popular in Japan, very high earner, the Gundam Extreme Versus Boost or something like that. Not the Gundapods, but like another Gundam game. It's always one of the top earners over at Japanese arcades, and just like, yeah, unfortunately the chances of that coming over are small. Now, there are a lot of games that do get tested in the States. It's just if they fail the test, then they just don't get released, because if a game can't make a certain amount of money, like I think the metric that most look for is $300 a week, then they're like, okay, this isn't going to do well enough, it's not going to sell well enough, so we're not going to take that risk and spend that money. And so like that was the case with Pokken Tournament and Tekken 7. Both of them were tested at Dave & Buster's, and I remember being told that Tekken 7 did okay, but it didn't do great, and so that's one reason why they just decided not to do it. And so could they bring that Dragon Ball game over? They could try it, but yeah, I guess it just depends on tests. I believe the very popular My game by Sega had also been on tests in the States, and it failed that. Even though that has a very strong fan base. Some of you might have seen that story recently where there was, I think it was a woman here in the States, moved to Hong Kong just so she could play My, which seems a little extreme to me. It's like, for how much that probably costs, it's probably cheaper to import a My machine to your house. But, I guess probably the reason why that she would justify it is it's also the community that makes it. It's not just the game, it's the community. And so that's another thing that is great about the arcade industry. The modern one is in this aspect that arcades always will have, is they are social get-together places, and so that's one thing that affects how the games play and what you get out of it too. Let's see. Yeah, Pac-Man Championship might be a great one. This was a surprising thing for me, since with Sega, is that while they have them listed, like Drone Racing Genesis, Storm Rider 2, these aren't released. These aren't shipping yet, from what I understand. And so, these I guess will be 2023 games, and all that. But thank you, Full Windman, for that comment as well. It's that's what I've always been trying to do at Arcade Heroes, is just reporting on new stuff, because nobody else does, or when they do, it's rare. It's like if Mario Kart comes out to arcades, Kotaku or IGN will mention it. Now, granted, places like IGN are gotten a little bit better, but they've mainly just covered pinball, and they've kind of ignored the rest of the video games. Like, I don't know of any major outlet that mentioned like Asphalt 9 Arcade or Fast and Furious Arcade, or any of these Sega games that came out. I mean, maybe there is one out there, I just missed it. But yeah, for the most part, all this stuff is ignored. Even though millions of dollars go into creating these new games, they're just ignored by the gaming press out there. And so that's what I tried to do, is be a voice for these games, and I guess that makes me a shill in a way for all these companies. But I try to keep an objective view about all these things. I mean, obviously I have my operator perspective. I try to look at things from a gamer perspective as well, and trying to remember what it's like when I'm a consumer and not just an operator. But yeah. And yeah, I mean, funny enough, the creation of the graphics card was like 3DFX, if you remember them, which got bought by AMD years ago. They started off creating their cards for like Atari games for the arcade company, and those became really. It was like, hey, that's a great idea for PCs as well, since they have all these expansion slots. And so it's something that started in arcades, ended up killing the arcade board, like the specially designed arcade board like Model 2, and I've always found this interesting fascination with distinctive arcade boards. But I do get it. It's already very expensive to develop these games. Like, most of these games are somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $5 million to develop the software and develop just a single, like a prototype game cabinet. Then it's even more millions of dollars to do production. And I was told this at IAPA from some heads of companies. More than one mentioned this to me because they were talking. The subject of cost came up, and when inflation and all that, and supply chain issues, etc. And one of the things that one of them said to me is, he's like, yeah, it costs us millions of dollars just to make this game, and that's not counting production. And for production, you have to buy every single component, every little screw, every little bolt, the rest of the parts of the cabinet, the lights, the monitor screen, the PC, the controls, and oftentimes the controls, like on games, are customized shells and stuff like that, which are not cheap to get. But you essentially have to buy the entire cabinet, and then you have to buy 100 of them, or you have to buy 400 or 500 or 1,000 of them, depending on what your sales projections are. And so these things are very, very expensive to be producing, and this is one reason why, of course, the costs are what they are. And why things don't cost $60 for like an Arcadia cart, and because you're not going to sell 30,000 units these days, most likely, or 1,000,000 units. You know, the best-selling arcade games of all time were like 100,000. Now, if there's something that's off that you guys want to play, let me know. I can help you. Yeah, it should work. Just it should be working. Yeah. But yeah, I'm back on the fighting games thing. Yeah, it's just, yeah, like certain locations, like FECs in general, just aren't places for fighters, and I get that. But it's like, how many arcades are great for fighters? I mean, like even at my place, which would be more conducive to fighters, and I have several. Like I have Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Street Fighter 2, Turbo, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, King of Fighters 98, Kung Fu vs. Karate Champ, Chaos Code Exa, and Samurai Showdown 5 Perfect. I've had others on the Neo Geo, like Breaker's Revenge and King of Fighters 2002. And, you know, just these games don't make a ton of money. The only time I've ever seen an arcade fighting game actually make money was when I had Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, and it was exclusive to arcades for a month and a half. And in that time, I've never seen a game earn like that. Like it out-earned like my Jurassic Park or my Maximum Tune or my Cruisin' Blast. It was crazy. But the moment the guys could get it at home, you know, they had no reason to come to the arcade other than the social aspect, which a few of them did for a while. But my Street Fighter 4 started making as much as my Street Fighter 2 did, but Street Fighter 4 cost me $10,000 for a kit. Street Fighter 2, you know, you can get those boards for a couple $100. And so, yeah, it's just, it's a different dynamic. And I think I did a video about talking about fighters last year as well, and just some of the problems that come into play. It's like for us operators, we need exclusive ones because we're not going to waste $10,000 or $15,000. Like I think the Tekken ones are usually closer to $15,000, and it just doesn't make sense because you're just begging to lose your money in most situations. Now there are some arcades out there that may have a very strong local community that's willing to support that community, or sorry, support that location and keep it going. Like Arcade UFO in Texas is one, and I know there's some arcades out in California that also just have that social dynamic with the locations. But in places like mine, I've found that it's been very hard to create communities. Like Maximum Tune 5, and this is one reason why I bought Maximum Tune 5, is because I heard about the community that was there, and so that worked. But again, with all those fighting games that I have, I just haven't been able to really get it. And like even Samurai Showdown 5 Perfect or Kung Fu vs. Karate Champ, again, they've done okay, but I wish they would do better. And but to do that, it's going to take probably more marketing efforts on my part, or finding out the games that those guys really want to play. And so, yeah. Now, I think that the Step Maniacs have seen an increase in price. Again, just due to inflation, supply chain stuff. At least that's what I heard. I mean, I got mine beforehand, and so yeah, it was in the 8,000 range, which again, versus how much importing a DDR costs, a brand new DDR or a Pump It Up, because Pump It Ups I think start at 11,000 or something like that. Yeah, it's definitely a much easier game for operators to go with. Have I seen a bootleg Street Fighter 2 in the wild? Probably. I just can't recall. It's been a long time. So, yeah. Yeah, like I haven't. Is it the Rainbow Edition of Street Fighter 2? I think that's is that infamous one. I don't think I've seen that one. Yeah, Capcom, they just don't care about if it's not Street Fighter. I mean, because, yeah, there was Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I don't remember what year that was now. But Yeah, I'm pretty sure it just did not do nearly as well as like Street Fighter 4 did, and so yeah, they do have fighters not named Street Fighter, but you want to know it, and it's like with SNK supporting like Samurai Showdown. I mean, personally, I would prefer to see a new King of Fighters that for arcades, or even a remake, whatever. Yeah, just here's the mallets. No rough play. Don't be like really hard. Okay, bring them back when you're done. Thanks. So last year, since that's what this video live stream is all about, Atari did Play Mechanics had, as some of you know, they did Centipede Chaos for Ice, and I think that was like 2019, somewhere around there. But last year on tests, they were doing a new multiplayer Asteroids. Unfortunately, it seems to have bombed tests, and so it didn't even show up at IAPA, and so that would have been the closest thing to it. Otherwise, last year, no, not that I recall, other than that test. Atari could work with EXA. I know they've worked with Polycade because recently Polycade just announced some sort of weird NFT thing with Atari. You might have seen like they were doing new cartridges or something, Asteroids, where they changed the graphics of Asteroids, working with an artist in LA or something like that. I didn't pay a ton of attention to it, but because I don't care about NFTs. But the last thing that Atari would have done in arcades. Now, granted, as a note, Atari themselves doesn't have any coders. Like all the people that made the games that people remember from Atari, Battlezone and Yar's Revenge and all those stuff. All those people they left the company years and years ago, back in the 80s, and so it's just not. The people that are in charge of it now are mainly licensing guys, marketing guys, and all that stuff. So any new game that is developed with the Atari logo on it, it's always by a third party. Like the new Atari 50th Anniversary Collection, that was done by Digital Eclipse, which they did a fantastic job on it. And again, soon I will be doing a review of that because it does have arcade games on it, so I can use that as an excuse to review it. But but Play Mechanics has shown interest because they did the new Centipede, and like I said, they tried Asteroids, but for some reason it failed test. And unfortunately, I never got a good picture of what that cabinet looked like. Never saw video of what the gameplay was like. So hopefully I'll come across that someday, and or maybe it'll make a comeback in a different form from what they were trying, but it looked like it was a 4-player version of Asteroids. But the last thing that Atari really did or licensed out in arcades was the Atari Pong by Unis, and so there was a 2-player version, and they actually had like 3 different versions of the 2-player model, and then they had Pong Knockout, which was a 4-player version. And so yeah, I actually forgot about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which shows you. On SP95, I did not count how many venues opened. Like earlier in the stream, I went through all the location watches, and like I know I missed some locations as well. I do recall, I think it was like 2015, I did a video where I just listed out and showed pictures of every single arcade location that had opened that year. But I'm not sure. I mean, 2022 was a good year for arcade openings. I mean, unfortunately, I did hear about a few more closures apart from my own. I know there were the big ones that got all the media attention in Japan because of the Sega name. But it does look like there's with that trouble going on with electrical prices across Europe, that could cause more closures. There's been a few already, but yeah, they that's an issue there. But I mean, 2022 overall was a very solid year, but I think part of it too was it was a glut of places that had been paused during the pandemic, during 2020 in particular. And like 2021 saw a few locations open, but there were several that had started in 2019 and would have been open in 2020 that had to do a pause, and then there was various issues that came out of that, particularly money issues, and so people just weren't able to open up until last year, and so that's what we're seeing now. So I don't know how much more of that momentum will continue into 2023. I mean, hopefully it'll remain strong. I mean, it really is a miracle that industry like this one was able to survive something like the pandemic, because for most places that had lockdowns, arcades were at the top of the list. They're considered non-essential entertainment, and of course, like I've already said multiple times, social places, and we didn't want any socializing going on, and so I mean, I know a lot of places did close in 2020 permanently, but I'm grateful. I'm very grateful that I was able to survive. In fact, I was able to find a way to expand, and that's when I opened my second location. But that enough places were able to either survive, or enough places were able to survive the pause and then open up afterwards. And so, yeah, there was that. Yeah, I mean, I may do a video about the history of Atari if anybody's interested, because, I mean, as you probably know, I'm kind of an Atari nerd. And when I was growing up, it was the first console that I really played, and I grew up in the 80s, and I remember the day that I moved the first time, the only time I moved as a kid was like 3.5, and I could still remember that day. I remember what I had for breakfast. I remember meeting my friend, a kid who would become my best friend growing up, and at his house, where I met him for the first time, he had an Atari 2600, and I can't remember if that was the first time I had come across an Atari. It might have been at my cousin's house. They also had a 2600, but I remember growing up playing those games, and so just that nostalgia works on me. But my friend also had an NES. Of course, growing up, everybody on my street, except for me, had an NES. I eventually got a Game Boy, but just from going to everybody's house, we would always also play NES. So I also have nostalgia for the NES too. And this friend, he had older twin brothers that had Sega, but we had to sneak into their room to play like the Master System, or the Genesis, which we did once in a while, but I didn't unfortunately get to play it as much as I wanted to. So it's usually like the NES. Like my friend, he would get the Nintendo stuff, so he got like an NES, he got a Super Nintendo. I remember playing Star Fox at his house and how cool that was at the time. And but yeah, we weren't able to play the Sega stuff as often, but it did have this allure to it because it was kind of forbidden. We weren't supposed to go in there and play it. But when we would sneak in, I remember playing Alex Kidd. I remember playing Moonwalker on the Genesis, which was an okay game, but not great. I remember playing Strider and stuff. And so like I have a soft spot for pretty much every game console out there, but I have a lot of I guess the softest spot is for Atari, and so I've bringing this tangent to a close. I've studied their history. I've always been fascinated by their history. I've always liked either underdogs or pioneers in things, and they obviously were a major pioneer. They used to be the biggest name in gaming, and of course after the crash and after they got sold off, that changed, and Nintendo took that crown, and Atari never got it back. But like I've noticed a lot of people don't know a lot of the history behind Atari, so maybe I'll have to do a video about that one of these times. And like I said, I'll do the video about the Atari 50th anniversary collection. I had really been hoping that Asteroids would have made it to IAPA so that I could have done stuff about that. But yeah, the future of Atari and arcades totally depends on licensing. Now, they last year I think it was, they got a new CEO, and I do like the direction he seems to be taking the company. Like he seems to be giving it its proper due. Like the guy before that, Fred Chesnais, I think his name was. He was just milking it. He was milking blood from a stone, and just like everything he was doing, including the new Atari VCS console, was just to milk it and increase the value of the brand. Because from what I was able to read, he was just trying to sell it off, and he wanted it, instead of making $5 million from it, he wanted like $200 million, and it was crazy. And so it felt very soulless. That everything that Atari had been doing for a long time, and but this new guy seems to understand what the brand was supposed to be about. Now they still have a long way to go, and like I think this has been the problem. Like Atari should have been doing stuff like Nintendo was doing, like back in the 80s and the 90s, like the late 80s and 90s under the Tramiels, of finding ways to do new things with their existing IPs, but also creating new game experiences. And now occasionally they did that, like Ninja Golf and the Atari 7800 was a wacky, crazy new IP. But it's like they should have done more stuff with Crystal Castles, or found a way to keep that in people's brains, or Star Raiders, or Yar's Revenge and stuff like that. And I wouldn't mind one day coming up with my own Yar's Revenge sequel. I have an idea for that. I won't unveil it yet, but I've had an idea for designing a Yar's Revenge sequel game that would be very different, but I think it would do it proper justice. And so and I get that too. Like the NES was huge. Like I said, growing up in the 80s, I mean, when I would go to school and we would go to recess, everybody talked about Nintendo games. Everybody was talking about Mario. Like I have some kids now, and they always talk about Minecraft, maybe Roblox, but like Minecraft gets all the talk. But it's like when I was a kid, everybody was talking about Mario. And of course, when Sonic the Hedgehog came out, then it was like, wow, that's cool, and like people like Sonic and stuff. But like Alex Kidd didn't hold a candle to Mario, at least on the playground. And so, but yeah, like I've lived in Brazil, and I was amazed by some of the stuff I saw there for Sega. I've seen some crazy weird consoles, with like 2 different cartridge slots and stuff. That were very fascinating. I wish I could have grabbed some and taken them home with me. But yeah, I get it. Like Sega is much bigger there in Europe, and I know Atari as well. That was one place that they were pretty strong. Like the Atari ST sold very well over in Europe, but it was barely a blip on the radar here in the States, and some other things like that. And so there was that. And yeah, like I'm actually thought about doing a new channel where I would just talk about home video games and stuff like Atari. And I've been thinking lately about doing a video of talking about the demise of the Atari VCS, because I followed that story very closely from the announcement and through all the drama stuff that went on. But like, I honestly think it's the most pointless console ever released. It has no exclusives, and there's nothing about it that's really unique. It's just a PC in a Atari 2600 like shell. I mean, yeah, it has the joystick. The remade CX40 joystick, but that works on any other PC too. And so there's nothing really unique about it that screams like, oh yeah, I gotta spend $300. And like I argued with guys on Atari Age about this many times, and like some of them were coming up with the dumbest excuses, like, oh, well, it has an Atari logo on it. Don't you want to be a true Atari fan? It's like, no, I'm not gonna waste money because of a logo. That's ridiculous. And it's like, I won't buy an Xbox because I like Microsoft, or a PlayStation because I like Sony, or a Switch because I like Nintendo, or because of the logo on there. That's dumb. To me, it's the content that matters. And so it's like, do I have a Switch? Yeah, I love it. And it's because it has games on it that I can't get on my PC. And, pretty much everything else I get on my PC. And so, yeah. Sorry if I'm boring you with all this Atari ranting. Fully automated standalone arcade space. Sorry, what do you mean by that? I guess meanwhile, just a quick look while I wait for that answer. As you've probably seen on the screen here, all this new stuff from Sega. One of their sales guys is really pushing the new augmented reality darts, which were at IAPA were pretty cool. It's just they're not really like an arcade machine since they're not in like its own arcade cabinet. And of course, plenty of redemption stuff that they have there. Yeah, I played Yars Recharged on the Atari 50th. That's pretty cool. And I also like how you can switch between the original and the new graphics, which obviously isn't a new idea, but it was still cool. Oh, non-manned arcades. Nothing that I recall hearing about throughout 2022. Just mainly that card systems continue to take over, and they're very popular. That's something I'm interested in doing. I mean, again, like I talked about at the very beginning of the stream, which feels like it was hours ago. Yeah, it was. I do want to eventually. I'm using tokens. I want to do a card system. Give it the times. I just don't have the money. But yeah, I haven't seen anything that really updates that. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade my memories either. So had some great gaming memories growing up, and I feel very fortunate to have been born in the 80s and get to experience that level of gaming. And it's very weird for me. You know, I can remember life before the internet. You know, there was a time where, you know, the only time you thought about the phone was when it was ringing in the house and it was attached to a long cord. It wasn't something you took with you, and it wasn't something that you texted with. It wasn't something you took pictures with. You know, it was just a phone to talk to somebody. And, you know, seeing that transition from technologically from what life was like in the 80s and the early 90s to, you know, starting to go online and checking news and watching videos and sharing things with friends. It's kind of bizarre. It's like the past is a foreign country. It's bizarre. It's an alien planet, pretty much. And so, but, you know, time travel hasn't been discovered yet, so. I mean, in a way, they kind of are there, working with Play Mechanics, with their Minecraft Dungeons arcade and the Halo. No idea if they have additional plans, if they want to do some sort of platform for it. Now, a few years back, there was this thing called the GameGate VU that allowed you to put an Xbox 360 into an arcade, and it was like an arcade cabinet. But, you know, you had your controllers there, your Xbox 360 controllers, and it was a timer. But they bombed. I think they were only around for about a year. And then, yeah, so, I mean, maybe somebody could try something. That wasn't an official Microsoft product, though. So it's possible that they could try it again. I mean, Microsoft's a huge company, and I know there's a few people there that love arcades. And obviously working with Play Mechanics also shows that. So maybe, but I haven't heard of anything. Like if they would want to do like an X-Arcadia style platform or something like that. Or a Polycade platform. As far as I know, does seem like X-Arcadia was satisfied with last year. I mean, they're going to be at JPO, which is a big Japanese trade show that happens in Tokyo next month. I'll have to look up the date to be sure when it is. But as far as I understand, they're going to have a bigger presence at JPO than they had at IAPA. And there are going to be some new games showed off. Granted, they'll have the stuff that we saw at, and not the cabinets, but like the games at IAPA. But yeah, there's, from my understanding, now of course some things can change from what I've heard that I can't talk about yet, but if some of the news that I heard actually comes to fruition with certain games that have been in development or looking to be developed for the X-Arcadia, it's going to be really cool by the end of 2023. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Yeah, I actually have a Chihiro in the back. It's dead, I think. So I probably just need to sell it off, make space on a shelf. But, yeah, we've been at this for a while. Any other questions of things you guys want to ask about or discuss, or anything coming into 2023. As I mentioned, EAG, which is a big expo in Europe, is happening tomorrow. I don't know what the time is over in the UK right now, but I'm sure it'll be morning there pretty soon, and or in a few hours. And so, I'll be keeping an eye on that for any news, and so keep an eye peeled to the blog. And then JPO is in February, and then Amusement Expo is in March. And so I need to get that taken care of, my flight and hotel, all that stuff for Amusement Expo, so that I could go there. And thank you so much, P. Goodspeed, for the super chat. Really appreciate that. And for all your support, everybody who subscribes, everybody who watches the videos, comments, likes them instead of dislikes them. I really do appreciate that. I'm doing what I can to spread the good word of arcades to the world and keep on top of the news and provide as accurate a news as I can. I mean, yeah, sometimes I get some things wrong, and so my apologies about that when I do, but otherwise doing what I can to keep it accurate. But yeah, just stay tuned to EAG. Another good place to look at is Arcade Belgium. I'm not sure if Xavier will be there, but he usually does go to EAG, and so I would imagine he'll be there to share news as well, but I'll be sharing what news I can. Just so far, Sega sent out an email saying what will be there, and it's basically everything that was at IAPA. So I don't think they'll have any new games. I'm not even sure if they'll have a new game that we not heard of before at Amusement Expo either. But of course, JPO might have something new as well. I mean, it's possible. I mean, one place where you could look for anime stuff right now would be X Arcadia. Now, granted, I don't know that they have any. I don't think they have any anime specific licenses on anything, but like Arcana Heart 3, which is a girl anime style fighter, that has somewhat of a following. I don't know how big the fan base is for Arcana Heart out there, but it's something. And they're always working with artists and stuff, so that could be one. But yeah, I mean, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there was an Attack on Titan VR experience that Taito had actually brought over to IAPA 2019, I think it was. I think there's a video of it on my channel. You just have to look up Taito or IAPA 2019, I think it is. And so that's the only one that I recall seeing. But unfortunately, Taito just hasn't had a team here in the States that's been really dedicated to getting stuff out. Like, they do have some guys from Japan that come over and promote stuff with, like, Eunice with their On Point game. But, they seem to not be focusing a lot on the on bringing stuff over here anymore. Oh yeah, there was that too. I almost forgot about that. There was a Capcom Attack on Titan game, but yeah, it was just kind of a mock-up that was shown, and then it disappeared. Or actually, it showed up like 2 or 3 years after, out of the blue, and then and I think it was like a dual joystick gun sort of thing, and kind of like Gunslinger Stratos, and then it just disappeared again. But that's the unfortunate reality, particularly after the pandemic, is that like Capcom, Konami, Taito, the teams of people that are working on arcade games have been greatly reduced, and in some cases they're practically non-existent. Like, I know with Taito, for the longest time they only had one guy dedicated to stuff in the United States, mainly for licensing. Now I think they expanded on that a little bit, and of course, but Taito's also not done a ton in Japan, just because after they got bought out by Square Enix. I guess Square Enix has wanted to do more games that are under their label, but they still seem to realize the value of the Taito label. Like, this year they're going to be celebrating 70 years of Taito, 45 years of Space Invaders. And so, the brands are there, but the people that made the games that we know and love for a lot of these companies have long since moved on to greener pastures, and that sucks. So, yeah, there was the JoJo game. I want to say there was another anime game over in Japan. It's just always in Japan. It's never here. I mean, I really enjoyed the, what was that anime called with the High Score Girl? Now, granted, I don't know if you could really do an arcade game out of that, since that's a love letter to arcades already. But something like that might be good. But my son is really into anime, and I haven't asked him lately what's the hottest anime out there right now. But Sailor Moon. Yeah, there have been some Sailor Moon arcade games. I mean, there have been a few anime arcade games here and there, shoot 'em ups and stuff. Of course, Toho came out on X Arcadia last year, and granted, I don't think that's an anime, right? But I know it's a big IP. So maybe something like a beat 'em up would be cool too. But yeah. Any other questions, comments you guys want to get at before I finish the stream? My voice is starting to die a little bit. Chainsaw Man. I'll have to look that up. Is the wind out of Sailor Moon's sails at this point? I got a phone call. Well, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to end the stream. Sorry. Oh, bring it. Hello? Hey, good, how are you? Sure. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, like usually, like if it's a classic game and it's a cocktail cabinet, then there would be a setting for like cocktail style, and then that would determine it. It could also, there should be a setting there, but it probably depends on the game. So some games might not have been made for like cocktail style cabinets, and so with that, it might not have the option at all. So you might have to find a way to reorient the monitor in that case. Yeah. Right. Sure, no problem. All right, you're welcome. Bye. Had an arcade question. I guess one last thought before I go is like One Punch Man. I did watch that. I know it's a few years old now, but that probably would have been a cool, like a beat 'em up or a fighting game sort of thing. Probably a beat 'em up would work better for that one. But anyways, a 6-player Power Rangers beat 'em up. Huh, yeah, that could be cool too. Something like that. I mean, I wouldn't mind a Thundercats beat 'em up. I don't think there ever was one. But I would have been partial to something like that. I think that could have been cool too. And most 80s cartoons and a lot of animes can work great as a beat 'em up game. Oh, it sucked. That's too bad. I mean, yeah, obviously in any of these, I'd say as long as it's done right, then it's all right. Then it would be good. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I can't say what it is, but there is a possibility of a new beat 'em up game with actually a couple that I've heard of that are in development for arcades. I don't know what their status is because I haven't heard of them in a while, so it's possible they got canceled. but if they were going to happen, it would seem like 2023 would be the time that they would happen, and so I'm hoping that this will be the year that we hear about them and then we see them. So maybe JPO will give us that hint. Of course, I did play at IAPA Jitsu Squad, which I know that's not based on an anime. It has, kind of an anime style to it. But that was a lot of fun. And actually, I did get that on Switch, and so I should do a review of that too, and then compare it with the arcade once the arcade version comes out. But anyways, thank you guys so much for sticking with me through these hours on talking about 2022. I hope you enjoyed what I do. And let me know what kind of content you want to see. I will have some, like I said, I'll do a review on the Atari 50th. I want to do a post-mortem on why I closed my other location. And then also talk about what games made money, what games didn't make money last year. I want to do a Minecraft Dungeons Arcade Series 2 direct capture video of the new Hidden Depths level. There was something else that I wanted to get to. Maybe EAG, if there's any big news that comes out of EAG, maybe I'll do another live stream or just a video. So got some ideas there. Sorry if any burps here, just from drink some bubbly stuff here. But again, thank you so much for watching, and stay true to being a hero out there.